Kill her before she kills again. Sarah Nightfall pressed her back against the cold stone wall of the pack house, her heart hammering as Alpha Reynolds' voice carried through the cracked window above her head. She'd only meant to retrieve her jacket from the meeting room, but now she was frozen in place, listening to her own death sentence. The curse is real, Victor, Elder Shadowmere's gravelly voice replied. 3 mates dead in 5 years. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes like that. She's one of our own, Alpha Reynolds said, but his protest sounded weak even to Sarah's ears. She was one of our own. Now she's a weapon pointed at the heart of our pack. How many more good wolves have to die before we act? Sarah's hands trembled as she crept closer to the window, desperate to hear more while dreading every word. The wooden ladder she'd climbed to reach the second floor creaked ominously beneath her weight. There has to be another way, Reynolds insisted. There is. Elder Shadowmere's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. Exile her to the rogues. Let them deal with the death, Sarah. At least then her curse won't touch pack blood. The ladder rung snapped. Sarah plummeted 15 feet, crashing through the azalea bushes below with a sound like breaking bones. Pain exploded through her left shoulder, but the physical agony was nothing compared to the crushing weight of betrayal in her chest. They want me dead. Or worse. She rolled to her feet, ignoring the warm trickle of blood down her arm, and ran. Behind her, shouts erupted from the meeting room as the pack leaders realized they'd been overheard. Sarah didn't look back. She couldn't. Not when every face she'd trusted, every voice she'd loved, had just voted to destroy her. The forest welcomed her like an old friend, branches parting to let her pass as she shifted mid-stride. Her wolf form was smaller than most, her coat the color of moonlight on water, but she was fast. Faster than anyone in the pack except Victor. The name hit her like a physical blow, and she stumbled, crashing into an oak tree that had probably stood here for centuries. Victor, who died just 2 weeks ago in a hunting accident that now seemed far too convenient. Victor, whose child she'd miscarried alone in these same woods just hours ago while mysterious figures watched from the shadows. How long had they been planning this? Sarah shifted back to human form, her naked skin scraped and bleeding from her fall. The October air bit into her flesh, but she welcomed the cold. It was honest, at least. Unlike the faces she'd called family for 23 years. She sank to her knees beside the creek that ran through the heart of the territory, staring at her reflection in the dark water. Auburn hair tangled with leaves, green eyes wild with panic, and blood from her shoulder wounds staining her pale skin. She looked exactly like what they'd called her. The Death Sarah. A twig snapped behind her. Sarah spun around, expecting to see pack warriors sent to drag her back for execution. Instead, a figure in a dark hooded cloak stood motionless between 2 massive pines. The same figure she'd glimpsed watching her earlier, during the worst moment of her life. Who are you? She demanded, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. The figure said nothing, but slowly reached up and pulled back their hood. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The face revealed was sharp and angular, with eyes like liquid silver and hair so black it seemed to swallow light. Definitely male, definitely dangerous, and definitely not from her pack. You're not supposed to be here, she said. His lips curved in what might have been a smile. Neither are you. Not anymore. The words sent ice through her veins because they were true. She was packless now, whether by exile or execution. Either way, she was as good as dead. What do you want? She whispered. He stepped closer, and Sarah caught his scent, pine and leather and something wild that made her wolf prick her ears with interest. Not pack. Not rogue either. Something else entirely. To offer you a choice, he said, his voice like velvet over steel. You can stay here and let them hunt you down like the animal they think you are. His silver eyes glinted in the moonlight. Or you can come with me and discover what you really are. I know what I am. I'm cursed. No. He extended his hand toward her, palm up. You're awakening. The question is whether you'll embrace it or let fear destroy you. Sarah stared at his outstretched hand, knowing that taking it would change everything. Behind her, the distant sound of howls rose through the night, her former pack, already hunting her trail. In front of her, a stranger offered salvation that might be worse than death. But what choice did she have? She reached for his hand, her fingers just inches from his palm, when a familiar voice shattered the night. Sarah. She turned to see Sage bursting through the trees, her best friend's face streaked with tears and terror. Don't trust him, Sage gasped, pointing at the stranger. He's Ravencrest pack. They're the ones who... The stranger moved faster than Sarah's eyes could follow. One moment Sage was speaking, the next she was on the ground, her throat torn open, blood pooling in the fallen leaves. Sarah screamed, but the sound died in her throat as she met the stranger's silver eyes. They held no remorse, no regret. Only cold calculation. Now you have no choice, he said simply. And Sarah realized that everything, Victor's death, the miscarriage, even the pack's decision to kill her, had been leading to this moment. She wasn't just cursed. She was being collected. Chapter 2. 6 months earlier. Sarah Nightfall stood in the Kit Winters of the pack house, flour dusting her apron as she kneaded bread dough with more force than necessary. The repetitive motion helped quiet the whispers that had been following her for weeks now, hushed conversations about the death Sarah that stopped abruptly whenever she entered a room. It had been 3 months since Elias drowned in the river, and the pack's suspicion had settled over her like a shroud. Even simple tasks like preparing meals for the communal dinner had become exercises in isolation. The other women gave her wide berth, as if tragedy might be contagious. The Kit Winters door swung open, and Alpha Reynolds entered with a stranger at his side. Sarah's hand stilled on the dough as she took in the newcomer, tall and powerfully built, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He moved with the fluid confidence of an alpha, his presence filling the room like electricity before a lightning strike. Sarah, Reynolds said, his voice carefully neutral. I'd like you to meet Victor Shadowmere. He's visiting from the Mountain Ridge Pack. Shadowmere. The name made her stomach clench. She'd heard whispers about the Mountain Ridge Pack. They were traditionalists, old-fashioned wolves who still believed in the ancient ways. They probably thought women like her should be locked away or worse. But when Victor stepped forward, his eyes held none of the wariness she'd grown accustomed to. Instead, he studied her with genuine interest, his gaze lingering on her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Miss Nightfall, he said, his voice deep and warm. It's a pleasure. Sarah wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. Mr. Shadowmere. Welcome to Silver Creek. Victor, he corrected, moving closer. And thank you. I've heard interesting things about your pack. The way he said interesting made Sarah wonder exactly what he'd heard. Probably stories about the cursed she-wolf who killed her mates. She waited for him to make an excuse and leave, the way everyone else did. Instead, he leaned against the counter and smiled. That bread smells incredible. My grandmother used to make something similar. It's just basic wheat bread, Sarah said, surprised by his casual tone. Nothing special. Everything special in the right hands. His eyes met hers, and Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a flutter of genuine attraction. Not the desperate gratitude she'd felt with her previous mates, but real, honest desire. Alpha Reynolds cleared his throat. Victor will be staying with us for the week. He's here to discuss potential trade agreements. Actually, Victor said, never taking his eyes off Sarah, I'm hoping to discuss more than just trade. Over the next 3 days, Sarah found herself drawn into Victor's orbit despite every instinct telling her to keep her distance. He sought her out during meals, walking her to the gardens and asking about her life with genuine curiosity. He didn't flinch when she mentioned her dead mates, didn't cross himself or mutter protective charms under his breath. You don't think I'm cursed, she said on the third evening as they sat by the creek where she'd lost so much. Victor was quiet for a long moment, skipping stones across the water's surface. I think you've had terrible luck. But curses? He shrugged. My grandmother always said the moon goddess doesn't waste her time cursing people. She's got better things to do. Sarah laughed despite herself. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was also completely insane, so take that wisdom with a grain of salt. Victor's smile faded as he turned to face her fully. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Her heart stuttered. Here it comes, she thought. The gentle letdown, the kind rejection, the suggestion that maybe they should just be friends. I know we've only known each other for 3 days, Victor continued, but I can't ignore what's happening between us. Can you feel it too? Sarah's breath caught. She could feel it, the electric pull, the way her wolf perked up whenever he was near, the sense of completion she'd been searching for her entire life. Yes, she whispered. Victor reached for her hand, his fingers warm and strong as they intertwined with hers. I want to claim you as my mate. Officially. In front of both our packs. The words hit her like a physical blow. Victor, you don't understand what you're asking. Everyone I've ever mated has died. I won't risk. I'm not everyone else, he said firmly. I'm an alpha. I'm strong enough to break whatever shadow's been following you. Sarah wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe that someone could finally be strong enough to weather the storm that seemed to surround her. But the fear ran bone deep. What if you're wrong? She asked. Victor lifted their joined hands and pressed his lips to her knuckles. Then I'll die knowing I had the most beautiful mate in the world, even if it was just for a little while. 2 nights later, during the pack's weekly gathering, Victor stood before the assembled wolves and made his declaration. Sarah felt the shock ripple through the crowd as he announced his intention to mate with her, but Victor's voice never wavered. I claim Sarah Nightfall as my chosen mate, he said, his hand warm on the small of her back. Any who would challenge this claim can answer to me. The silence stretched so long that Sarah began to wonder if anyone would ever speak again. Then Alpha Reynolds stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The Mountain Ridge Pack accepts this mating, he said formally. As does Silver Creek. Let the moon goddess bless this union. The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs, but Sarah barely heard them. Victor's arm tightened around her waist, and for the first time in months, she felt something like hope blooming in her chest. Maybe this time would be different. For 2 weeks, it was. Victor moved into her small cottage on the edge of pack territory, and Sarah discovered what it meant to be truly happy. He was tender and passionate, protective without being possessive. He made her laugh, made her feel beautiful, made her believe that maybe the curse had finally been broken. She should have known it wouldn't last. The change began subtly. Victor started spending more time with his beta, a sharp-eyed man named Daniel who'd arrived from Mountain Ridge a few days after the mating announcement. Sarah would catch them in intense conversations that stopped abruptly when she appeared. Victor became distracted during their meals, his responses delayed as if his mind was elsewhere. On the night of the full moon, Sarah found him in his study, ancient books spread across the desk like tarot cards predicting doom. She recognized some of the volumes, texts about wolf lore and pack history that most people considered more myth than fact. What are you reading? She asked, moving to peer over his shoulder. Victor tensed, quickly closing the book nearest to him. Nothing important. Just some research Daniel suggested. But Sarah had already seen the page he'd been studying. The illustration showed a she-wolf with red eyes and blood dripping from her fangs, standing over the bodies of fallen males. The caption read, "The death-bound wolf, a curse upon the pack." Ice flooded Sarah's veins. Victor. It's nothing, he said again, but his voice carried a note of desperation. Just old superstitions. Sarah picked up another book from the pile, this one open to a passage about she-wolves whose very touch brings death to their mates. The text was clinical, detached, but each word felt like a knife sliding between her ribs. You think I'm cursed, she said quietly. Victor spun around, his face pale. Sarah, no. I don't. You do. She could see it in his eyes now, the doubt that had been growing like a cancer. Daniel showed you these books, didn't he? Convinced you that I'm some kind of monster. That's not. 3 mates, Victor. 3 dead mates in 5 years. What are the odds of that happening naturally? Sarah's voice cracked as she spoke the words that had been haunting her for months. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am death-bound. Victor reached for her, but she stepped back. The gesture felt like a rejection in itself. I need some air, she said, and fled before he could respond. She walked the forest paths until dawn, her mind churning with possibilities she didn't want to face. By the time she returned to the cottage, Victor was gone. A note on the Kit Winters table said he'd gone to consult with the pack elders about important matters. Sarah knew she'd lost him before he even returned. That evening, the entire pack gathered for the full moon ceremony. Sarah stood at the edge of the circle, watching the other wolves prepare for the ritual that would officially seal her mating bond with Victor. She wore the traditional white dress, her hair braided with silver ribbons, but she felt like she was dressed for a funeral instead of a celebration. Victor arrived late, his face set in stone. He walked to the center of the circle where Alpha Reynolds waited, but he didn't look at Sarah. Not once. We gather under the full moon to witness the completion of a mating bond, Reynolds began, his voice carrying across the clearing. Victor Shadowmere of Mountain Ridge, do you accept Sarah Nightfall as your mate in the eyes of the moon goddess? This was the moment. The simple yes that would bind them together for life. Sarah held her breath, waiting for words that would change everything. Instead, Victor lifted his head and looked directly at her for the first time all day. What she saw in his eyes made her knees nearly buckle. Fear. Revulsion. And something that looked uncomfortably like hatred. No, he said clearly. I reject Sarah Nightfall as my mate. I reject her bond, her claim, and her place in my life. The gathered wolves gasped as if they'd been physically struck. Someone behind Sarah let out a small cry of shock. But Sarah herself felt nothing. No pain, no surprise, no anger. Just a vast, echoing emptiness where her hope used to be. The ancient texts speak of she-wolves bound to death itself, Victor continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. Creatures whose very existence brings doom to those who love them. I will not tie my fate to such darkness. Such darkness. The words echoed in Sarah's mind as she watched the man she'd thought loved her tear her apart in front of everyone she'd ever known. This was worse than Victor's death, worse than Elias's drowning. This was deliberate, calculated cruelty. I reject her, Victor said again, and Sarah felt something inside her chest simply stop. Her wolf, the constant companion who'd been with her since childhood, went completely silent. Not angry, not hurt, just gone, as if Victor's rejection had severed the connection between Sarah's human and animal souls. The ceremony dissolved into chaos as pack members whispered and pointed, but Sarah couldn't hear them over the roaring silence in her head. She turned and walked away from the circle, from the pack, from the life she'd tried so hard to build. Nobody followed her. Sarah packed her few belongings in a traveling bag, her movements mechanical and precise. She felt disconnected from her body, as if she was watching someone else prepare to leave everything behind. The cottage that had briefly felt like home now seemed like a museum of broken dreams. She left at dawn, walking the forest paths that led to the pack's territorial border. Each step felt like walking through quicksand, her body growing heavier with exhaustion she couldn't explain. By the time she reached the boundary markers, Sarah could barely stand. The silence where her wolf should be was deafening. She'd heard of wolves who lost their animal spirits. They rarely survived more than a few days. The human body wasn't meant to exist without its other half. Sarah collapsed just past the boundary stones, her bag spilling its contents across the forest floor. She lay there staring up at the canopy of leaves, wondering if this was how she'd die, alone, rejected, and spiritually severed from everything that made her whole. She was still lying there when the patrol found her. What do we have here? A voice said above her. Sarah tried to lift her head but couldn't manage it. Through her blurred vision, she saw 3 figures standing over her, 2 men and a woman, all wearing the dark clothing of pack security. Looks like a refugee, the woman said, kneeling beside Sarah. She's burning up with fever. Check her scent, one of the men ordered. Make sure she's not diseased. The woman leaned closer, and Sarah caught a whiff of her scent, pine and earth and something wild that spoke of mountain territory. She's not sick, the woman said after a moment. She's dying. Her wolf's gone silent. Rejection fever, the first man said grimly. Seen it before. Poor thing probably got cast out for something. Should we leave her? The second man asked. No. The woman's voice was firm. Alpha's orders are clear. Any refugees found on our borders get brought in for evaluation. Even the dying ones. Strong arms lifted Sarah from the ground, and she felt herself being carried deeper into territory she didn't recognize. The last thing she remembered before unconsciousness claimed her was the woman's voice, speaking words that would haunt her dreams. Welcome to Ravencrest territory, little wolf. Let's see if our alpha can fix what your pack broke. Chapter 3. The first thing Sarah noticed when consciousness returned was the absence of pain. Not physical pain, that had been a constant companion since Victor's rejection, but the bone-deep ache of spiritual emptiness that had nearly killed her. Her wolf was still silent, still gone, but something else had taken its place. A strange, thrumming energy that felt like standing too close to a power line. She opened her eyes to find herself in a room that belonged in an expensive hotel rather than a pack house. Cream-colored walls, mahogany furniture that gleamed with careful maintenance, and windows that looked out onto manicured gardens instead of wild forest. The bed beneath her was larger than any she'd ever slept in, draped in Egyptian cotton that probably cost more than most wolves made in a month. You're awake. The voice came from a chair positioned near the window, and Sarah turned to see a woman with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes the color of winter storms. She wore a business suit that managed to look both professional and predatory, a combination that should have been impossible but somehow worked perfectly on her. Where am I? Sarah's voice came out as a croak, her throat raw from fevered dreams she only half remembered. Ravencrest Corporation headquarters. The residential wing. The woman rose and moved to a side table, pouring water from a crystal pitcher into a matching glass. You've been unconscious for 3 days. I'm Lydia Sterling, head of human resources for the Supernatural Division. Sarah accepted the water with shaking hands, trying to process what she'd heard. Supernatural Division? Lydia's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. The Ravencrest brothers don't just run a business empire, Miss Nightfall. They run a supernatural business empire. Werewolves, vampires, fae, witches. If you have power and need employment or sanctuary, Ravencrest Corporation provides both. The water helped her throat, but Sarah's mind was still struggling to catch up. How do you know my name? Your former pack was quite forthcoming when we inquired about your status. Apparently, Silver Creek was eager to confirm that you were no longer their responsibility. Lydia's tone was carefully neutral, but Sarah caught the undercurrent of disapproval. Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. Of course they'd been eager to disown her. She'd brought nothing but shame and death to their territory. The fever broke yesterday, Lydia continued, settling back into her chair. But you were muttering in your sleep. Interesting things about rejection bonds and spiritual severing. Dr. Hawthorne, our pack physician, says you're lucky to be alive. Lucky. Sarah almost laughed. If this was luck, she'd hate to see what misfortune looked like. A knock at the door interrupted her bitter thoughts, and Lydia called out a crisp enter. The door opened to admit a man who made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. He was tall, easily 6'4", with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it and eyes the color of midnight. His features were sharp enough to cut all angles and shadows that spoke of aristocratic breeding. He wore a charcoal suit that had definitely been tailored specifically for his broad shoulders and narrow waist, and when he moved, it was with the fluid grace of a predator who knew he was at the top of the food chain. But it was his scent that made Sarah's absent wolf stir for the first time since Victor's rejection. Cedar and rain and something darker that made her think of midnight hunts and forbidden desires. Miss Nightfall. His voice was deep, cultured, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. I'm Damon Ravencrest. Welcome to our territory. Sarah struggled to sit up straighter, suddenly aware of how she must look in a borrowed nightgown with her hair tangled around her shoulders. Thank you for helping me. I know you didn't have to. You're right. We didn't. Damon's interruption was smooth as silk and twice as cutting. Which makes your presence here a matter of considerable inconvenience. Lydia shot him a warning look, but Damon ignored it, his dark eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her want to disappear into the expensive bedding. Tell me, he continued, moving to stand at the foot of her bed like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence, how many mates have you killed? The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She felt what little color she'd regained drain from her face, and her hands began to shake so badly she had to set down the water glass. Damon, Lydia said sharply, but he held up a hand without looking away from Sarah. It's a simple question. Our scouts reported that you were suffering from rejection fever, a condition that occurs when a mate bond is severed. But according to Silver Creek's Alpha, this wasn't your first failed mating. So I'll ask again, how many mates have you killed? Sarah's throat felt like sandpaper. 3, she whispered. 3. Damon repeated the word like it tasted bitter. 3 alphas, all dead within months of bonding with you. What are the statistical odds of that occurring naturally, do you think? I didn't kill them, Sarah managed, though even to her own ears the words sounded weak and unconvincing. Of course not. You just happened to be present when they all met untimely ends. Damon's smile was as cold as a winter morning. How terribly unlucky for you. Before Sarah could respond, the door burst open with enough force to rattle the crystal water pitcher. Another man strode into the room, and Sarah's already strained mental faculties nearly short-circuited. If Damon was dark and dangerous, this newcomer was sunshine and warmth made flesh. Golden hair that caught the light like spun silk, eyes the color of summer meadows, and a smile that could have powered the building's electrical grid. He was shorter than Damon by perhaps an inch, but broader through the shoulders, and when he moved it was with an easy confidence that spoke of someone who'd never met a stranger. For fuck's sake, Damon, the newcomer said, his accent crisp and distinctly British. The poor girl's been unconscious for 3 days and you're already interrogating her like she's applying for a loan? Phoenix. Damon's voice carried a warning that would have made most people step back. Phoenix, apparently, was not most people. Don't Phoenix me. The golden-haired man moved to Sarah's bedside with the kind of easy familiarity that suggested he was comfortable in any situation. I'm Phoenix Ravencrest, he said to Sarah, offering her a smile that was probably illegal in several states. The good-looking brother. Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the bone-deep exhaustion, Sarah felt her lips twitch in what might have been the beginning of a smile. There she is, Phoenix said triumphantly. I knew there was a real person under all that misery. Lydia, has anyone bothered to feed her actual food, or are we still subsisting on whatever magical 4-drip Hawthorne hooked up? She just woke up 20 minutes ago, Lydia said dryly. 20 minutes? Phoenix looked appalled. And nobody thought to mention that we have an actual angel recovering in our guest suite? I'm ashamed of our hospitality. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm not, I'm hardly an angel. Clearly you haven't looked in a mirror recently. Phoenix settled into the chair Lydia had vacated, somehow managing to make the formal piece of furniture look like a throne. Though I suppose mirrors might be in short supply when you're recovering from whatever fresh hell your last pack put you through. The casual mention of her past made Sarah's brief moment of levity evaporate. She looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap like broken birds. Phoenix. The new voice came from the doorway, and Sarah looked up to see a third man who was clearly another Ravencrest brother. This one fell somewhere between Damon's darkness and Phoenix's light, auburn hair that caught red highlights in the afternoon sun, amber eyes that seemed to see too much, and features that were more comfortable than handsome but somehow more appealing because of it. Atlas, Phoenix said without turning around. Come to join Damon's interrogation, or are you here to actually be helpful? Atlas stepped into the room with measured steps, his gaze moving from Sarah to his brothers and back again. I came to see how our guest was feeling and to discuss her options going forward. Her options? Damon's voice could have frosted the windows. She has one option: leave. Today, preferably. She nearly died, Atlas said quietly. Whatever happened with her previous pack, she needs time to recover before she brings her curse down on our heads. Damon moved closer to the bed, and Sarah had to resist the urge to shrink back against the pillows. Before she adds 3 more names to her list of dead mates. I'm not looking for mates, Sarah said quickly, the words tumbling over each other in her haste to get them out. I don't want to bond with anyone. I just need somewhere to go, somewhere I can disappear and not hurt anyone else. The room fell silent, and Sarah realized she'd just confirmed everything Damon suspected about her. She was cursed, dangerous, toxic to anyone who got too close. See? Damon's voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more cutting than if he'd shouted. She knows exactly what she is. A walking death sentence. Phoenix shot to his feet so quickly his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. That's enough. Is it? Damon turned to face his brother, and Sarah felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Are you volunteering to be number 4, Phoenix? Ready to test your luck against whatever darkness follows her around? What I'm ready to do, Phoenix said, his voice losing all trace of its earlier warmth, is show some basic human decency to someone who's clearly been through hell. Human decency doesn't bring back dead alphas. Neither does being a complete bastard, but that's never stopped you before. Enough. Atlas's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Both of you. This isn't helping anyone. Sarah watched the 3 brothers face off, seeing years of complicated family dynamics play out in the space of seconds. These weren't just business partners or pack mates, these were siblings who loved each other despite fundamental differences in how they saw the world. And she was the wedge being driven between them. I should go, she said quietly, pushing back the covers with hands that only trembled slightly. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have. You shouldn't have what? Phoenix whirled around, his green eyes blazing. Nearly died? Needed help? Made the mistake of trusting that people might show you a shred of compassion? Phoenix is right, Atlas said, moving to Sarah's other side. You're not leaving until you're strong enough to survive on your own. End of discussion. Like hell, Damon snarled. My territory, my rules, Atlas replied calmly. Or did you forget that this particular safe house falls under my jurisdiction? The look Damon gave his brother could have melted steel, but he didn't argue. Sarah got the impression that while Damon might be the eldest, Atlas was the one who made decisions about their humanitarian efforts. Fine, Damon said finally. But when she brings death and destruction down on our heads, don't say I didn't warn you. He turned on his heel and stalked toward the door, pausing only long enough to deliver one final blow. Try not to get too attached, Phoenix. I'd hate to see you join her collection. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows, and Sarah felt tears she'd thought were long exhausted burn behind her eyes. Don't listen to him, Phoenix said fiercely. He's right. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Everything he said, it's all true. I am cursed. I do bring death to everyone I care about. And I will end up hurting both of you if I stay. She pushed herself out of bed, ignoring the way the room spun around her like a carousel. Her legs felt like water, barely able to support her weight, but she forced herself to stand. I need to leave. Tonight. I won't be responsible for. The world tilted sideways, and Sarah felt herself falling. Strong arms caught her before she could hit the floor, and she found herself looking up into Phoenix's concerned green eyes. Easy there, love, he murmured, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all. You're not going anywhere in this condition. I have to, Sarah whispered, even as her treacherous body relaxed into his warmth. I can't let anything happen to you. Nothing's going to happen to me, Phoenix said firmly, settling her back onto the bed with infinite care. Or to Atlas, or even to that bastard Damon, much as he might deserve it. You know why? Sarah shook her head, not trusting her voice. Phoenix's smile was soft, gentle, nothing like the playful grin he'd worn earlier. Because we're Ravencrests, love. And Ravencrests don't break that easily. Over his shoulder, Sarah saw Atlas watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was something in his amber eyes, not the hostility she'd seen in Damon's, but not the easy warmth of Phoenix's either. Something more complicated, more dangerous. Something that made her broken wolf stir restlessly in the depths of her damaged soul. Get some rest, Atlas said quietly. We'll discuss your future tomorrow, when you're stronger. As the two brothers left her alone with Lydia, Sarah stared up at the ceiling and wondered if running away in the middle of the night was really such a bad idea after all. Because despite Phoenix's confidence and Atlas's quiet strength, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Ravencrests might not break easily, but everyone had a breaking point. And she was very, very good at finding them. Chapter 4. Sarah woke to the sound of raised voices echoing from somewhere below her window. The argument was muffled by distance and thick glass, but the anger in the tones was unmistakable. She glanced at the clock on the nightstand, 3 a.m. Whatever was happening, it was urgent enough to drag people from their beds. She slipped from beneath the silk sheets, her bare feet silent on the plush carpet as she moved to the window. The gardens below were illuminated by security lights, revealing a cluster of people near the main entrance. Even from 3 stories up, she could see the tension in their postures, the way they stood like opposing armies preparing for battle. A soft knock at her door made her turn. Come in. Lydia entered, but this wasn't the composed businesswoman Sarah had met earlier. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her suit jacket nowhere to be seen, and there was a grim set to her mouth that made Sarah's stomach clench with dread. Get dressed, Lydia said without preamble. Quickly. The brothers want to see you in Atlas's office. What's wrong? Sarah reached for the clothes Lydia had provided, dark jeans and a simple sweater that probably cost more than Sarah's entire previous wardrobe. Your former pack has arrived. Lydia's voice was carefully controlled, but Sarah caught the underlying tension. Along with representatives from the Werewolf Council. They're demanding your immediate return. Sarah's hand stilled on the sweater. Return? But I was exiled. Victor rejected me in front of everyone. Apparently, rejection doesn't negate pack responsibility in the eyes of the council. You were born into Silver Creek, and unless you're formally adopted by another pack or... Lydia paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. Or bonded to a mate from outside their territory, you're still considered their property. Property. The word hit Sarah like a slap. She finished dressing in silence, her mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. If the council forced her to return to Silver Creek, what kind of life would she have? They'd made it clear she wasn't wanted. At best, she'd be an outcast. At worst. Sarah. Lydia's voice was gentler now. The Ravencrests aren't going to let anything happen to you. But you need to understand, this could mean war between packs if not handled carefully. War. Because of her. Because she couldn't just disappear quietly like she was supposed to. The walk to Atlas's office felt like a march to the gallows. The Ravencrest corporate headquarters was impressive even in the middle of the night, all gleaming surfaces and modern art that probably cost more than most people's houses. But Sarah barely noticed the luxury around her. All she could think about was the fact that her very existence was about to cause a conflict that could get people killed. Atlas's office was on the top floor, behind double doors made of what looked like solid mahogany. Lydia knocked once and opened them without waiting for a response. The scene inside made Sarah's breath catch. Atlas stood behind a massive desk, his auburn hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. Phoenix paced in front of floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city, his usually perfect golden hair falling across his forehead. And Damon. Damon sat in a leather chair like it was a throne, his dark eyes fixed on a tablet in his hands. He looked up when Sarah entered, and the expression on his face made her want to turn around and run. Ah, the guest of honor, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Come to discuss the terms of your surrender? Damon. Atlas's voice carried a warning that would have silenced most people. Damon merely shrugged and returned his attention to the tablet. Sit down, Sarah, Phoenix said, abandoning his pacing to pull out a chair positioned in front of Atlas's desk. His voice was gentle, but she could see the tension in the set of his shoulders. Sarah sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. Lydia said the council is here. 3 council members, along with Alpha Reynolds and 2 of his enforcers, Atlas confirmed, settling into his own chair. They're demanding your immediate return to Silver Creek territory. On what grounds? Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. Pack law, Damon said without looking up from his tablet. Apparently, a rejected mate can still be considered pack property if she was born into the territory. Fascinating loophole, really. It's not a loophole, Atlas said sharply. It's an outdated law that should have been changed decades ago. But it's still on the books, which means they have legal standing. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. What happens if I go back? The silence that followed was answer enough. They'll find a way to blame you for something, Phoenix said finally. Probably claim you're a danger to pack stability. Best case scenario, you're exiled to live alone on the borders. Worst case. He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Sarah had heard the stories of wolves who were deemed too dangerous to live freely among the pack. They didn't usually end well. There is another option, Atlas said carefully. It's unconventional. Damon snorted. Unconventional is putting it mildly. What kind of option? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Atlas leaned forward, his amber eyes serious. Pack law also states that a bonded mate cannot be forced to return to her birth pack against her will. If you were to marry one of us, a contract marriage, purely for legal protection, the council would have no choice but to recognize your new pack affiliation. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah stared at Atlas, trying to process what he was suggesting. A contract marriage, she repeated slowly. It would be purely business, Atlas continued. No emotional obligations, no physical requirements. Just a legal document that would give you the protection of our name and our pack. And who exactly would be volunteering for this suicide mission? Damon's voice was cold enough to freeze the windows. Phoenix stopped pacing and turned to face them. I'll do it. Like hell you will, Damon snarled, finally looking up from his tablet. Have you completely lost your mind? Someone has to protect her, Phoenix shot back. And at least I'd enjoy the time I have left. The casual way he mentioned his potential death made Sarah's stomach clench. No. Absolutely not. I won't let any of you. It's not your choice, Atlas interrupted. The offer's been made. Someone needs to take it. I'll do it. The words came out of Atlas's mouth with quiet determination. I'm the middle brother, the logical choice. I don't have Damon's responsibilities as eldest or Phoenix's, enthusiasm for risk. Your enthusiasm for martyrdom is showing, Damon said dryly. And it's remarkably unattractive. This isn't about martyrdom, Atlas replied. It's about doing what's right. What's right, Damon said, rising from his chair with predatory grace, is letting them take her back and washing our hands of this entire mess. We don't owe her anything. We owe her basic human decency, Phoenix said hotly. Something you seem to have misplaced. Human decency doesn't resurrect dead alphas, Phoenix. And it won't resurrect whichever one of us is stupid enough to tie himself to her. Sarah had heard enough. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Stop. All of you, just stop. The 3 brothers turned to look at her, and Sarah realized she was shaking, not with fear, but with rage. You're talking about me like I'm not even here, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. Like I'm some object to be passed around or disposed of. Well, I'm not. I'm a person, and I have a say in what happens to my life. Sarah, Atlas started. I'm not finished. Sarah's wolf might be silent, but she could feel something else stirring in her chest, a strength she'd forgotten she possessed. You want to know what I think? I think you're all missing the obvious solution. Damon's dark eyes narrowed. Which is? Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to suggest would either save her life or make everything infinitely worse. Ancient Pack Law, she said. Section 12, subsection 4. A female wolf facing exile or death can request protection bonding with multiple mates if her life is deemed to be in extraordinary danger. The silence that followed was so complete Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Multiple mates, Phoenix repeated, his voice carefully neutral. It's called a protection trinity, Sarah continued, forcing herself to meet each of their gazes in turn. 3 contract bonds instead of 1. It would give me the legal protection I need, and it would distribute the risk. Distribute the risk, Damon said slowly. You mean if your curse kills one of us, there are 2 backups? The blunt way he put it made Sarah flinch, but she nodded. Something like that. That's. Phoenix ran a hand through his golden hair. That's actually brilliant. That's completely insane, Damon countered. You want us all to sign our death warrants? I want to give all of us the best chance of surviving this, Sarah said quietly. Ancient magic works differently than modern bonding. The bonds would be weaker individually, but stronger collectively. If something happens to one of you, the others might be protected by the shared connection. Atlas was staring at her with something that might have been admiration. Where did you learn about protection trinities? My grandmother. She was a scholar of old pack laws. She used to tell me stories. Sarah's voice trailed off as she remembered sitting at her grandmother's feet, listening to tales of ancient magic and forgotten traditions. She'd never thought those stories would be relevant to her own life. Stories, Damon said dismissively. Ancient magic is mostly superstition and wishful thinking. Maybe, Sarah said. But it's still legally binding. The council would have to recognize it. Phoenix was grinning now, that dangerous smile that probably got him into trouble on a regular basis. I love it. When do we start? We don't, Damon said flatly. This is madness. It's a solution, Atlas corrected. And frankly, it might be our only option. Damon stared at his brothers for a long moment, then turned that dark gaze on Sarah. You realize what you're asking for, don't you? 3 bonds, even contract ones, create connections. Responsibilities. You wouldn't just be our business partner, you'd be our pack. The way he said pack made it sound like a 4-letter word. I understand, Sarah said. But it would be strictly business. No real intimacy, no emotional entanglements. Just legal protection. Just legal protection, Phoenix repeated, and something in his voice made Sarah look at him more closely. His green eyes held a heat that made her pulse quicken despite herself. That's right, she said firmly. Nothing more than what's absolutely necessary. And what exactly is absolutely necessary? Damon asked, his voice silky with danger. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. The bonding ceremony. Whatever rituals are required to make it official. But beyond that, we're roommates with matching legal documents, Atlas finished. I can live with that. Of course you can, Damon said. You can live with anything as long as it serves your savior complex. Better a savior complex than whatever twisted psychology makes you enjoy watching people suffer, Phoenix shot back. Enough. Atlas's voice cut through the brewing argument like a blade. Sarah's made her suggestion. We need to decide, now. The council isn't going to wait much longer. Sarah watched the 3 brothers exchange looks loaded with years of complicated history. She could practically see them communicating without words, weighing options and consequences in the space of heartbeats. Finally, Atlas nodded. I'm in. Obviously, I'm in, Phoenix said, that dangerous grin still playing around his lips. All eyes turned to Damon. He stood perfectly still for what felt like an eternity, his dark gaze moving from Sarah to his brothers and back again. This is a mistake, he said finally. When this goes wrong, and it will go wrong, I want it on record that I predicted the disaster. Is that a yes? Phoenix asked. Damon's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. It's a yes. God help us all, it's a yes. But as he stalked toward the door, he paused and looked back at Sarah with an expression that made her blood run cold. Just remember, little wolf, he said softly. You asked for this. All of it. When the bills come due, don't expect any of us to pretend we didn't know the cost. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows, leaving Sarah alone with Atlas and Phoenix and the weight of what she'd just set in motion. Well, Phoenix said cheerfully, this should be interesting. Sarah stared at the closed door and wondered if she'd just saved her life or signed 3 death warrants. Only time would tell. Chapter 5. The Protection Trinity bonding ceremony had taken place at dawn, conducted by a council elder who looked like he'd rather be performing an exorcism. Ancient words in the old tongue, ceremonial marks drawn on their wrists with blessed silver, and the strangest sensations Sarah had ever experienced, like lightning splitting into 3 separate paths through her chest. That had been 2 weeks ago, and Sarah was beginning to think she'd made a terrible mistake. She stood at the window of what was now officially her suite in the Ravencrest residential wing, watching Phoenix's morning run through the gardens below. Even from 4 stories up, she could see the easy grace of his movements, the way he made something as simple as exercise look like poetry in motion. He'd invited her to join him every morning for the past 14 days. She'd declined every time. Your coffee, Miss Nightfall. Sarah turned to find Victor, not her dead mate Victor, but Victor Winters, one of the 2 bodyguards Damon had assigned to her. He was a compact man with intelligent eyes and the kind of stillness that spoke of extensive combat training. His partner, a tall redhead named Sarah, was currently stationed outside her door. Thank you. Sarah accepted the delicate china cup, inhaling the rich aroma of what was undoubtedly single-origin coffee that cost more per pound than most people's weekly grocery budget. Everything in the Ravencrest world was expensive, beautiful, and designed to impress. Including, apparently, the coffee service for unwanted house guests. Mr. Damon asked me to inform you that he'll be in meetings all day, Victor continued, his tone carefully neutral. He wanted to ensure you knew not to expect him for the evening meal. Of course he did. Damon had been finding excuses to avoid sharing meals with her since the bonding ceremony. Sarah was beginning to suspect he'd rather eat broken glass than sit across a dinner table from her. I understand, she said, taking a sip of the perfectly prepared coffee and trying not to think about how much effort someone had put into making it exactly the way she liked it. Atlas, probably. He seemed to catalog those kinds of details about everyone around him. Victor hesitated at the door. Miss Nightfall? If you don't mind me saying, Mr. Damon isn't. He's not as cold as he seems. The situation is difficult for all of them. Sarah looked at the bodyguard with surprise. In 2 weeks, he'd barely spoken beyond the necessary pleasantries. Why are you telling me this? Because you look like someone who blames herself for everything that goes wrong, Victor said gently. And that's not fair to you. Or to them. After he left, Sarah found herself staring at her reflection in the window, seeing what Victor had seen. Dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights, a wariness in her posture that spoke of someone always ready to run. She looked like a woman living in a beautiful prison, which wasn't entirely inaccurate. The Protection Trinity bonds were supposed to be lighter than true mate bonds, but Sarah could feel them anyway, 3 distinct threads of connection that pulled at her consciousness. Damon's thread was ice and shadows, Atlas's was steady warmth like a banked fire, and Phoenix's was golden light that seemed to pulse with mischief and barely contained energy. The problem was, she was starting to care about the people on the other end of those threads. And caring was dangerous. A knock at her door interrupted her brooding. Come in. She expected Victor or Sarah, but it was Atlas who entered, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the kind of tailored suit that probably cost more than a car. Good morning, he said, his amber eyes doing a quick assessment of her appearance. I hope you slept well. It was the same greeting he gave her every morning, polite and professional. Sarah had started to wonder if he practiced it in the mirror. Well enough, she replied, which was their established morning dance. She hadn't slept well in weeks, and they both knew it, but acknowledging it would require a level of intimacy that neither of them was comfortable with. I have some documents for you to review, Atlas continued, settling into one of the sitting area chairs and opening his portfolio. Legal protections, financial arrangements, that sort of thing. Sarah joined him, accepting the papers with hands that only trembled slightly. Everything was laid out in meticulous detail, bank accounts established in her name, credit cards with limits she couldn't have imagined, healthcare provisions that would make most people weep with envy. All the practical considerations of someone who was now, legally speaking, part of one of the most powerful supernatural families in the country. This is too much, she said, staring at the numbers on the bank statement. It's standard, Atlas replied, his tone suggesting there was no room for argument. You're a Ravencrest now, even if it's only temporary. You'll be expected to maintain certain appearances. Temporary. The word stung more than it should have. About that, Sarah said carefully. How temporary are we talking? Atlas's expression didn't change, but she caught the slight tension in his shoulders. As long as it takes to ensure your safety. We're working on finding you a permanent placement with a pack that's far enough from Silver Creek territory to discourage any interference. A permanent placement. Like she was a piece of furniture that needed to be stored somewhere appropriate. I see, Sarah said, keeping her voice level. And all three of you are comfortable with that arrangement? Phoenix is less enthusiastic about the timeline than Damon and I, Atlas admitted. But he understands the necessity. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Phoenix appeared in the doorway, having apparently charmed his way past her bodyguards. His golden hair was still damp from his shower, and he'd changed into dark jeans and a sweater that clung to his broad shoulders in ways that should have been illegal. Are we talking about me? He asked, flashing that dangerous smile as he moved into the room. I do love being the subject of conversation. We were discussing Sarah's future arrangements, Atlas said, his tone carefully neutral. Ah yes, the Great Exile Plan. Phoenix settled onto the couch next to Sarah, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her think of midnight adventures and stolen kisses. Tell me, love, are you eager to be shuffled off to parts unknown? Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm grateful for everything you've done. All of you. But I understand that this arrangement isn't ideal. Ideal, Phoenix repeated, his green eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her want to squirm. No, I suppose it isn't. Though I'm curious, what would ideal look like to you? The question caught her off guard. What would ideal look like? A real home? A family that wanted her? Someone who looked at her the way Phoenix was looking at her now, but without the shadow of inevitable death hanging over them? I don't think about ideal, she said finally. I think about survival. Phoenix's expression softened, and for a moment, Sarah caught a glimpse of something deeper than his usual playful facade. That's a hell of a way to live, sweetheart. It's the only way I know how. Maybe it's time to learn a new way. Before Sarah could respond, Atlas cleared his throat. Phoenix, don't you have a conference call with the Tokyo office? In an hour, Phoenix replied without taking his eyes off Sarah. Plenty of time to have a proper conversation with my lovely wife. Wife. The word made Sarah's stomach flutter in ways she didn't want to examine too closely. Legally, that's what she was, wife to all three of them, bound by ancient laws and modern contracts. But the reality felt nothing like the fairy tale the word suggested. Speaking of conversations, Atlas said, rising from his chair, we need to discuss tonight's pack meeting. All the regional leaders will be there, and they'll want to meet Sarah. Sarah's blood ran cold. I have to attend? You're a Ravencrest now, Phoenix said gently. Even temporarily. These things come with the territory. Damon will make the introductions, Atlas continued, ignoring the way Sarah's face had gone pale. Keep it brief and professional. And if they ask about the curse? Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Atlas and Phoenix exchanged a look that spoke of conversations she hadn't been part of. They won't, Atlas said finally. They wouldn't dare. But Sarah caught the uncertainty in his tone, and she knew they were all thinking the same thing. The supernatural community loved gossip almost as much as they loved politics. Her reputation had undoubtedly preceded her. That evening, Sarah stood in front of her closet, staring at the array of designer clothes that had appeared as if by magic. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and chosen by someone who understood both fashion and pack politics. She selected a midnight blue dress that was elegant without being flashy, professional without being severe. When she emerged from her room, she found all three brothers waiting in the hallway. Atlas wore a charcoal suit that emphasized his auburn hair and amber eyes. Phoenix had opted for a navy blazer over dark jeans, managing to look both casual and devastatingly handsome. And Damon. Damon looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread titled, "How to Intimidate Your Enemies in Formal Wear." His black suit was perfectly tailored, his dark hair styled with mathematical precision, and his expression could have frozen the Atlantic. "You look beautiful," Phoenix said, offering her his arm. "Thank you." Sarah accepted the escort, trying not to notice how perfectly her hand fit in the crook of his elbow. The PAC meeting was held in the Ravencrest corporate headquarters main conference room, which had been transformed for the occasion. The long table had been replaced with smaller groupings of chairs, and the harsh fluorescent lighting had been dimmed in favor of warmer ambient lighting. It looked more like a cocktail party than a business meeting, but Sarah could feel the undercurrents of power and politics flowing through the room like electrical current. "Stay close," Atlas murmured as they entered. "Let us handle the introductions." Sarah nodded, acutely aware of the way conversations paused as they walked through the room. She could feel the weight of dozens of gazes, the careful assessment of people who were used to evaluating potential threats and opportunities. Atlas. Phoenix. A tall woman with silver hair and ice-blue eyes approached them, her smile warm but calculating. "And this must be the famous Sarah Nightfall." "Sarah Ravencrest, actually," Phoenix corrected smoothly. "Sarah, this is Miranda Frost, Alpha of the Northern Territories PAC." "A pleasure," Miranda said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I've heard so much about you." Sarah shook the offered hand, trying not to flinch at the barely veiled curiosity in the other woman's eyes. "Thank you." "Tell me," Miranda continued, "how are you finding married life? 3 husbands must keep you busy." The comment was delivered with a smile, but Sarah caught the barb underneath. Before she could respond, Damon appeared at her shoulder like a shadow materializing from darkness. "Miranda," he said, his voice cool as winter morning. "How delightful to see you again. I trust your PAC's recent difficulties with the humans have been resolved?" Miranda's smile faltered slightly. "Of course. A minor misunderstanding." "Minor," Damon repeated, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "I'm sure the 3 humans who ended up in the hospital would agree." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah found herself caught between admiration for Damon's protective instincts and confusion about why he was bothering to defend her when he clearly wanted nothing to do with her. "If you'll excuse us," Atlas said smoothly, "we should make our rounds." As they moved away from Miranda, Sarah caught Damon's sleeve. "Thank you," she said quietly. He looked down at her hand on his arm as if it were a venomous snake. "Don't read too much into it. I was simply correcting a tactical error in her approach." But as he walked away, Sarah could have sworn she saw something flicker in his dark eyes. Something that looked almost like warmth. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Sarah found herself cataloging the way the 3 brothers worked together: Atlas's diplomatic charm, Phoenix's disarming humor, and Damon's subtle intimidation tactics. They were a formidable team, and she was beginning to understand why the Ravencrest Corporation had become such a power in the supernatural world. It was during the formal portion of the meeting that everything went sideways. "Now then," said Magnus Thornfield, the council representative who was chairing the meeting, "we should address the elephant in the room. The Protection Trinity Bond." Sarah felt every eye in the room turn toward her, and she had to fight the urge to shrink back in her chair. As you all know, Magnus continued, such bonds are rarely invoked in modern times. The Ravencrest brothers have taken on considerable risk in offering sanctuary to forgive me, Mrs. Ravencrest. The risk is manageable, Atlas said calmly. Is it? Magnus' smile was razor-sharp. Tell me, Damon, as the eldest, how do you feel about the arrangement? Sarah's heart stopped. She could feel Phoenix tense beside her, could see Atlas's jaw tighten. But Damon simply stood, his expression unreadable. The arrangement, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, is temporary. A humanitarian gesture while we locate a more permanent solution for Sarah's situation. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Temporary. Humanitarian gesture. Permanent solution. And when you find this solution? Magnus pressed. The bonds will be dissolved, Damon said without hesitation. We have no intention of maintaining a trinity indefinitely. Sarah felt something inside her chest crack. She'd known this was the plan, had even agreed to it, but hearing Damon announce it so publicly, so coldly, made it real in a way that hurt more than she'd expected. I see, Magnus said, clearly pleased with the response. Well, that's certainly practical. The meeting continued around her, but Sarah barely heard another word. She felt like she was drowning in plain sight, surrounded by people who saw her as nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. When the meeting finally ended, Sarah excused herself as quickly as possible, claiming fatigue. She made it to her suite and was reaching for the door handle when Phoenix caught her arm. Sarah, wait. She turned to find all three brothers standing in the hallway, their expressions ranging from Phoenix's obvious concern to Atlas's carefully controlled worry to Damon's unreadable mask. Are you all right? Atlas asked. I'm fine, Sarah said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. Just tired. Damon didn't mean, Phoenix started. Yes, he did, Sarah interrupted. And that's fine. We all knew what this was. I need some time alone. She was reaching for the door handle again when the lights went out. The hallway plunged into absolute darkness, and Sarah heard the distinct sound of the building's security system engaging, steel shutters slamming down over windows, doors locking automatically, emergency protocols activating. What the hell? Phoenix's voice was cut off by a sound that made Sarah's blood run cold, the sharp whistle of an arrow cutting through air. Something hit the wall beside her head with enough force to embed itself in the expensive wallpaper. In the emergency lighting that flickered on, Sarah could see the silver arrowhead gleaming inches from where her face had been. Assassins, Damon snarled, and suddenly he was moving, faster than humanly possible, tackling Sarah to the ground as another arrow whistled over their heads. How many? Atlas's voice was calm despite the chaos, and Sarah could hear him on his phone, probably calling security. At least 3, Phoenix replied, and Sarah realized he was crouched beside a window, peering through a crack in the security shutters. Professional. They knew exactly which room was hers. Silver Creek, Damon said grimly, his body still covering Sarah's as arrows continued to thud into the walls around them. They decided to solve their problem permanently. Sarah felt tears burn behind her eyes. Even here, even protected by ancient bonds and modern security, her past had found her. And now the 3 people who'd offered her sanctuary were risking their lives because of her curse. I have to go, she whispered. This is my fault. I should. Like hell, Phoenix said fiercely. You're not going anywhere. He's right, Atlas said, ending his phone call. Security is on the way. We just have to hold position until... A window exploded inward, glass showering the hallway as a figure dressed in black repelled through the opening. Sarah caught a glimpse of silver eyes and a familiar face before Damon was on his feet, moving with lethal grace. The fight that followed was brutal and beautiful and terrifying. Sarah had never seen the brothers in combat before, had never witnessed the deadly efficiency that made them apex predators. Damon fought like a shadow given form, striking from darkness and disappearing before his opponents could react. Atlas was methodical and precise, every movement calculated for maximum impact. And Phoenix. Phoenix fought like joy and fury had been given physical form, his movements flowing from attack to defense to attack again with an artistry that was breathtaking. But there were more assassins than Sarah had realized, and they kept coming. Silver Creek had sent their best, and they were prepared for werewolf opponents. When Sarah saw the gunman taking aim at Phoenix's back, she didn't think. She just moved, throwing herself between the weapon and its target. The bullet meant for Phoenix's heart caught her in the shoulder instead, spinning her around and sending her crashing to the floor. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but what scared her more was the way the world seemed to tilt sideways. Sarah. Phoenix's roar of rage was inhuman, primal, and suddenly the hallway was full of snarling wolves where men had been standing moments before. Through the haze of pain and shock, Sarah watched 3 massive wolves tear through the remaining assassins with a savagery that should have terrified her. Instead, she felt oddly comforted. They had come for her. All of them, even Damon, were willing to kill to protect her. As consciousness faded, the last thing Sarah heard was Damon's voice, human again, rough with an emotion she'd never heard from him before. Get the doctor. Now. And if she dies, I'll kill every last one of them myself. The darkness that claimed her was warm and peaceful, filled with the phantom sensation of 3 different hands holding hers and 3 different voices calling her name. Chapter 6. The bullet had been silver. Sarah learned this when she woke in the Ravencrest private medical facility, her shoulder bandaged and her body feeling like she'd been trampled by a herd of angry elk. The silver explained why her supernatural healing hadn't kicked in immediately, why she felt weak as a newborn kitten instead of annoyed but functional. You're awake. The voice came from the shadows by the window, and Sarah's heart did something complicated when she recognized Damon's silhouette. He was still wearing his blood-stained suit from the night before, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and there was something in his posture that spoke of a man who hadn't moved from that chair in hours. How long? Her voice came out as a croak. 18 hours. Damon moved closer, and in the soft lighting she could see the exhaustion etched in the sharp planes of his face. The doctor had to dig the silver fragments out piece by piece. You nearly died. But I didn't. Sarah tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through her shoulder. Don't. Damon was beside her in an instant, his hand surprisingly gentle as he eased her back against the pillows. The wound is still healing. Silver poisoning takes time to work through your system. His hands lingered on her arms for a moment longer than necessary, and Sarah caught something in his dark eyes, relief, maybe, or something that looked dangerously close to fear. Then he stepped back, his expression shuddering closed again. Where are Atlas and Phoenix? She asked. Cleaning up. Damon's voice was grim. Security sweep of the building, interrogating the survivors, coordinating with law enforcement. The usual aftermath of an assassination attempt. Survivors? Sarah's stomach clenched. How many were there? 8. 3 made it out alive. Damon's smile was razor-sharp and completely devoid of warmth. They're currently reconsidering their life choices in our detention facility. Before Sarah could respond, the door opened and Atlas entered carrying a steaming cup and looking like he'd actually managed to shower and change clothes. His amber eyes went immediately to Sarah's face, and she saw some of the tension ease from his shoulders when he confirmed she was awake and alert. Coffee, he said, offering her the cup. Though the doctor would prefer you stick to water for now. The doctor can go to hell, Sarah said, accepting the coffee gratefully. The rich aroma alone made her feel more human. I need caffeine more than I need medical advice. Spoken like a true Ravencrest, Phoenix said from the doorway, and Sarah's heart did that complicated dance again. He looked tired but was attempting his usual grin. How are you feeling, love? Like I got shot, Sarah said dryly. But alive, which is more than I expected. Phoenix's expression darkened. You shouldn't have done that. Thrown yourself in front of a bullet meant for me. Why not? Sarah met his gaze steadily. You would have done the same for me. That's different. How? Phoenix opened his mouth, then closed it again, clearly struggling with an answer. Because you matter and I don't, Sarah supplied silently. Because you have people who would mourn you and I'm just a temporary inconvenience. Because, Damon said quietly, you're under our protection. Not the other way around. And yet here I am, shot because people are trying to kill me, Sarah pointed out. Seems like the protection is running the wrong direction. That won't happen again, Damon said, and there was something in his voice, a cold promise that made Sarah shiver despite the warm room. I'm taking personal oversight of your security detail. Sarah blinked in surprise. What about Victor and Sarah? They're good, Atlas said carefully, but they're not family. Family. The word hung in the air between them, weighted with implications none of them seemed ready to examine. You don't need to do that, Sarah said finally. I know you have more important things. No, Damon cut her off, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. I don't. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken tension. Sarah found herself studying Damon's face, looking for some clue about what was happening behind those dark eyes. He looked like a man who'd been pushed past his breaking point and was barely holding himself together. Right, Phoenix said after a moment, his tone deliberately light. Well, now that we've established that Damon has decided to become Sarah's personal bodyguard, perhaps we should discuss the other issue. What other issue? Sarah asked, though she had a sinking feeling she didn't want to know. Atlas and Phoenix exchanged a look that made Sarah's stomach clench with dread. Your father is here, Atlas said gently. The coffee cup slipped from Sarah's suddenly nerveless fingers. Phoenix caught it before it could hit the floor, but Sarah barely noticed. My father? Malcolm Nightfall arrived this morning with a delegation from Silver Creek, Atlas continued, his voice carefully neutral. He's demanding your return. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Her father. The man who'd stood silent while the pack whispered about her curse, who'd done nothing when Victor had publicly humiliated her, who'd never once defended her against the rumors and suspicions that had poisoned her entire life. What did you tell him? She asked, proud that her voice came out steady. To go to hell, Phoenix said bluntly. Phoenix, Atlas said reproachfully. What? It's true. That's exactly what we told him. Maybe not in those exact words, but the sentiment was clear. We informed him that you're under our protection and that any attempt to remove you from our territory would be considered an act of war, Damon said formally. Sarah stared at him. You what? You heard me. You can't declare war over me, Sarah said, panic rising in her chest. I'm not worth. Don't. Damon's voice was deadly quiet. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Sarah fell silent, startled by the fury in his tone. You are under Ravencrest protection, Damon continued, his dark eyes burning into hers. That means something. It means that anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through us first. And I promise you, Sarah Nightfall, that is not a fight they will win. But. No buts, Phoenix said firmly. We chose this. We chose you. And we protect what's ours. Ours. The word hit Sarah like a physical blow, and she had to blink back sudden tears. When was the last time anyone had claimed her as theirs? When was the last time anyone had been willing to fight for her? He's still my father, she said weakly. Biology doesn't make family, Atlas said quietly. Choice does. Actions do. And from what you've told us, your father made his choice a long time ago. Sarah wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because Atlas was right. Her father had chosen the pack's superstitions over his own daughter. He'd chosen silence over support, fear over love. Where is he now? She asked. Waiting in conference room A, Atlas replied. With two of his betas and what appears to be the pack's head hunter. He brought hunters? Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. Standard intimidation tactic, Damon said dismissively. He's trying to show strength. You don't understand, Sarah said, struggling to sit up despite the pain in her shoulder. My father doesn't bluff. If he brought hunters, he intends to use them. The three brothers exchanged another look, this one heavy with grim understanding. Then he's about to learn why that's a mistake, Phoenix said softly. No. Sarah grabbed Phoenix's wrist with her good hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Promise me you won't fight him. Promise me. Phoenix frowned. Sarah. Promise me, she repeated, her voice breaking. I can't. I can't lose anyone else. Please. The raw desperation in her voice seemed to freeze all three men. Phoenix covered her hand with his expression going soft in a way that made Sarah's chest ache. Sweetheart, he said gently, we're not going anywhere. You don't know that, Sarah said, tears spilling over despite her efforts to contain them. Everyone dies. Everyone I care about dies, and I can't. I can't watch it happen again. Sarah. Damon moved closer, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. Look at me. She raised her tear-filled eyes to meet his dark gaze. We are not your previous mates, he said quietly. We are not weak, and we are not careless. And we are not going to die because some small-minded alpha thinks he can intimidate us. But what if? No what ifs, Atlas said firmly. We deal in facts. And the fact is that your father has no legal claim on you. You're an adult who chose to leave. You're bonded to us, even if it's temporary. And most importantly, you're under our protection. The protection bond means something, Damon added. It's not just ceremony and paperwork. There are ancient laws governing it, laws that supersede pack authority. Your father knows this, Phoenix said. Which means he's either desperate or stupid. Or both, Atlas muttered. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to pull herself together. What happens now? Now we go downstairs and have a civilized conversation with your father, Atlas said diplomatically. During which we make it very clear that you're staying exactly where you are, Phoenix added. And if he doesn't like it, he can take it up with the council, Damon finished coldly. Sarah nodded, though her stomach was still churning with anxiety. I should get dressed. You should stay in bed, Damon said immediately. I'm not facing my father in a hospital gown, Sarah said with more firmness than she felt. I need to be able to look him in the eye. After a brief argument that Sarah won through sheer stubborn determination, she found herself standing in front of her closet 20 minutes later, trying to choose an outfit that said, I'm fine and you can't intimidate me, while accommodating a bandaged shoulder. She settled on a simple black dress that she could slip on without raising her arms too high, paired with low heels that would let her stand without wobbling. The mirror showed a pale woman with dark circles under her eyes, but her chin was raised and her spine was straight. That would have to be enough. The three brothers were waiting for her in the hallway, all of them having changed into formal business attire. They looked like exactly what they were, dangerous predators in expensive suits. Ready? Atlas asked gently. Sarah nodded, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Let's get this over with. The walk to the conference room felt like a march to her execution. Sarah was acutely aware of Damon beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, of Atlas on her other side, his presence steady and reassuring, of Phoenix behind her, ready to catch her if she stumbled. They paused outside the conference room door, and Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was coming. Remember, Damon said quietly, you don't owe him anything. Not explanations, not apologies, not compliance. You're not alone in there, Phoenix added. And if at any point you want to leave, we leave, Atlas finished. Sarah nodded, grateful for their support even as her hands trembled slightly. Then Atlas opened the door, and she was face to face with the man who'd given her life but never quite managed to give her love. Malcolm Nightfall looked older than she remembered, his dark hair now more silver than black, lines of stress etched deep around his eyes. But his posture was as rigid as ever, his expression as cold and judgmental as it had been the day she'd left Silver Creek. Flanking him were Beta Thomas Reed, a man Sarah had known since childhood, and someone she didn't recognize but who had the distinctive build and bearing of a professional hunter. All three men rose as they entered, but their body language was anything but welcoming. Sarah. Her father's voice was exactly as she remembered, flat, disappointed, resigned. Father. She was proud that her voice didn't shake. You look. Malcolm's gaze swept over her, taking in the expensive dress, the careful styling, the bandaged shoulder visible beneath the dress's modest neckline. Different. I look healthy, Sarah corrected. I look like someone who's being taken care of. Something flickered in her father's eyes, hurt, maybe, or anger. You look like someone who's forgotten where she comes from. I haven't forgotten anything, Sarah said quietly. Including why I left. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Sarah was aware of the three brothers behind her, their silence more threatening than any words could have been. This has gone on long enough, Malcolm said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he'd always used when trying to end arguments through dominance. You've made your point, Sarah. You've had your adventure. But it's time to come home. This is my home now, Sarah said simply. Malcolm's face darkened. This is not your home. These people are not your family. You belong with your pack. Do I? Sarah asked, and there was steel in her voice now. Because I distinctly remember being told that I was a curse on the pack. That I brought death wherever I went. That it would be better for everyone if I just disappeared. You're being dramatic. Am I? Sarah stepped forward, and she felt rather than saw Damon move slightly behind her, ready to intervene if necessary. Tell me, Father, what exactly changed? Because last I checked, I was still the same woman who supposedly killed 3 mates. I'm still the death Sarah. So what's different now? Malcolm's jaw clenched. What's different is that you're embarrassing the family by playing house with these people. The word people was delivered with enough disdain to make it clear exactly what Malcolm thought of the Ravencrest brothers. These people, Phoenix said conversationally, have shown your daughter more care and respect in 2 weeks than you apparently managed in 23 years. Malcolm's gaze snapped to Phoenix, his eyes flashing with anger. I don't recall asking for your opinion, pup. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah felt Damon go very still behind her, and she knew without looking that his expression had gone deadly. Careful, Atlas said softly. That's not a road you want to go down. Are you threatening me? Malcolm demanded. I'm giving you free advice, Atlas replied smoothly. Take it or leave it. Malcolm turned back to Sarah, his expression hardening. Enough games. You're coming home. Tonight. No, Sarah said simply. I'm not. This isn't a request. And this isn't a negotiation, Damon said, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the room. His voice was quiet, controlled, and absolutely lethal. Sarah is under Ravencrest protection. She's legally bonded to us through ancient pack law. Your authority over her ended the moment she accepted our offer of sanctuary. Malcolm's face went red. Ancient pack law? You think you can hide behind legal technicalities? I think, Damon said, rising from his chair with fluid grace, that you're a poor excuse for a father who abandoned his daughter when she needed him most, and now you want to drag her back because her absence makes you look weak. The words hit their target with devastating accuracy. Malcolm actually stepped back, his face going pale with rage. How dare you? How dare I what? Damon moved around the table with predatory slowness, and Sarah saw her father's beta tense, ready for violence. How dare I speak the truth? How dare I point out that you stood by and watched your pack torment your own child? How dare I suggest that a real father would have defended her instead of letting them drive her away? You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Damon's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. Tell me, Malcolm, where were you when the pack was calling her cursed? Where were you when Victor publicly humiliated her? Where were you when she was grieving alone, convinced that everyone she loved was going to die? Each question was delivered like a physical blow, and Sarah watched her father flinch with each one. You want to know about abandonment? Damon continued, his voice rising slightly for the first time. Let me tell you about abandonment. It's watching the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally turn their backs when things get difficult. It's being treated like a burden, like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be protected. It's having your own family decide that it's easier to believe lies than to stand up for the truth. Sarah stared at Damon in shock. The raw pain in his voice, the way his hands had clenched into fists, the fury that seemed to radiate from every line of his body, this wasn't just about her. This was personal. So don't you dare, Damon finished, his voice dropping back to a deadly whisper, come into my territory and demand that I hand over a woman I'm sworn to protect to the same people who failed her so completely. The silence that followed was deafening. Malcolm looked like he'd been slapped, his face cycling through shock, rage, and something that might have been shame. She's still my daughter, he said finally, but the words lacked conviction. No, Damon said flatly. She's mine now. Ours. And we don't abandon family. The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered Sarah. Should have made her bristle at being claimed like property. Instead, it made something warm and desperate unfurl in her chest. This isn't over, Malcolm said, but he was already moving toward the door, his beta and the hunter flanking him. Yes, Atlas said quietly, it is. After they left, Sarah found herself staring at the closed door, her emotions in complete chaos. Relief, gratitude, confusion, and something dangerously close to hope all warred for dominance in her chest. Are you all right? Phoenix asked gently. Sarah turned to look at the three men who had just declared war on her behalf, who had claimed her as family, who had stood between her and the man who should have protected her years ago. I don't understand, she said finally. What don't you understand? Atlas asked. Why you did that? Why you? Sarah struggled for words. I'm temporary, remember? A humanitarian gesture. So why declare war over someone you're planning to pass off to another pack? The three brothers exchanged a look that was heavy with unspoken communication. Sarah, Phoenix said carefully, about that. We need to talk, Atlas interrupted. About what? Damon moved closer, his dark eyes serious. About the fact that temporary might not be as temporary as we originally thought. Sarah stared at him, her heart beginning to race. What do you mean? I mean, Damon said quietly, that somewhere between the bonding ceremony and watching you take a bullet meant for my brother, temporary stopped feeling like an option. The words hung in the air between them, changing everything. Chapter 7. The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire, thick, choking, impossible to ignore. Temporary stopped feeling like an option. Sarah stared at Damon, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone in the room could hear it. I don't understand. Yes, you do, Phoenix said softly. You're just afraid to believe it. She was. God help her, she was terrified to hope that these three incredible men might actually want her for more than just a legal arrangement. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you hurt. We should sit, Atlas said, ever practical. This conversation requires coffee. And probably something stronger. 20 minutes later, they were back in Sarah's suite, settled in the sitting area with a pot of Atlas's expertly brewed coffee and a bottle of Phoenix's favorite whiskey. Sarah curled up in the corner of the sofa, her wounded shoulder aching but her mind razor-sharp despite the pain medication. Start from the beginning, she said. All of it. I'm tired of feeling like I'm walking through a minefield blindfolded. The brothers exchanged one of their wordless communications, and then Atlas leaned forward, his amber eyes serious. Our parents died when I was 17, he began quietly. Damon had just turned 18, Phoenix was 16. Rogue attack on the Pack lands. They were trying to protect the families in the outer territories when they were overwhelmed. Sarah's heart clenched. I'm so sorry. The Pack expected us to step down, Damon continued, his voice flat and emotionless in the way Sarah was beginning to recognize as his defense mechanism. 3 teenagers couldn't possibly run a corporation worth billions, lead a pack of over 300 wolves, maintain territorial agreements with a dozen other supernatural groups. But you did, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. We had to, Phoenix said, and for once his usual brightness was dimmed. It was step up or watch everything our parents built crumble. So we stepped up. The first year was hell, Atlas admitted. 18-hour days, constant challenges to our authority, everyone waiting for us to fail. We learned to depend on each other completely because there was literally no one else. Sarah could picture it, 3 teenage boys suddenly thrust into a world of adult responsibilities, grieving their parents while fighting to keep their family legacy alive. No wonder they were so fiercely protective of each other. We swore we'd never let anyone get between us, Damon said, his dark eyes fixed on some point beyond Sarah's shoulder. That family came first, always. That we'd never let ourselves be vulnerable to the kind of loss that could destroy us. And then you walked into our lives, Phoenix said with a rueful smile, and completely destroyed our carefully constructed emotional defenses. Sarah felt her cheeks heat. I didn't mean to. We know, Atlas said gently. That's what made it so dangerous. Damon stood abruptly, moving to the window and staring out at the garden below. His shoulders were rigid with tension, and Sarah could practically see him fighting some internal battle. Damon, she said softly. Talk to me. He was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he might not answer. Then, without turning around, he spoke. I've been cold to you because caring about you terrifies me, he said, his voice so low she had to strain to hear it. I've spent 7 years building walls to protect myself from the kind of pain that losing my parents caused. And then you show up, broken and beautiful and brave, and suddenly those walls feel like paper. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. I told myself it was temporary, Damon continued. That I could keep my distance, honor the protection bond without getting emotionally involved. But then you threw yourself in front of a bullet meant for Phoenix, and I realized I was already in so deep that losing you would destroy me anyway. The raw honesty in his voice made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. She looked at Atlas, who was staring into his coffee cup like it held the secrets of the universe. What about you? She asked gently. Atlas raised his head, and Sarah saw the same vulnerability in his amber eyes that she'd heard in Damon's voice. I've been distant because I'm already falling in love with you, he said simply. And I can see what it's doing to my brothers. Phoenix lights up whenever you're in the room. Damon's been more protective of you than he's ever been of anyone, including us. And I know that if something happens to you, it won't just destroy you, it'll destroy all of us. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. Atlas. I've been trying to manage the risk, he continued. Stay close enough to protect you, far enough away to survive losing you. But there is no safe distance, is there? Not when it comes to love. Sarah turned to Phoenix, who was uncharacteristically quiet. And you? Phoenix's usual smile was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he looked young and uncertain in a way that made Sarah want to wrap him in her arms. You want the truth? He asked. The playful, carefree thing I do? It's partly real, but it's also armor. When our parents died, someone had to keep morale up. Someone had to make sure we didn't all drown in grief and responsibility. So I became the one who made jokes, who found reasons to smile, who reminded everyone that life was still worth living. He ran a hand through his golden hair, messing up the careful styling. But with you, I'm scared the armor isn't enough, he admitted. I'm scared that you're so damaged by what's happened to you that you'll never heal enough to love anyone again. And I'm scared that if I fall completely in love with you, which, let's be honest, I'm about 90% there already, you'll disappear one day and take the best part of me with you. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion and unspoken fears. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the honesty they'd just shared, by the depth of feeling she could see in each of their faces. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Do what? Damon asked, turning from the window. Care about people without being terrified that they'll die because of me. Trust that you won't leave. Believe that I deserve to be loved. Phoenix was off the couch and beside her in an instant, his hands cupping her face gently. You do deserve it, he said fiercely. You deserve everything good in this world, Sarah Nightfall. And we're going to spend however long it takes proving that to you. Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. The ringtone, an old country song that Victor had programmed in as a joke, made her blood run cold. "That's impossible," she breathed, staring at the device like it was a venomous snake. "What?" Atlas was immediately alert. "That ringtone. It's..." Sarah's hands shook as she picked up the phone. The caller ID confirmed her worst fear. "It's Victor. But he's dead. He has to be dead." Damon moved across the room with predatory grace, his expression darkening. "Answer it. Put it on speaker." Sarah's finger trembled as she accepted the call. "Hello, beautiful." The voice that came through the speaker was indeed Victor, rough, arrogant, and very much alive. "Miss me?" "You're dead," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor laughed, and the sound made Sarah's skin crawl. "Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Did you really think a little fall in the woods would kill me? I'm tougher than that, sweetheart." Phoenix's hand found Sarah's, squeezing gently. She could feel the three brothers' protective instincts ramping up to dangerous levels. "What do you want?" Damon asked, his voice deadly calm. "Ah, the famous Damon Ravencrest. I want what's mine. Sarah belongs to me." "Sarah belongs to herself," Atlas said firmly. "And she's made her choice." "Has she?" Victor's voice was sly, knowing. "Tell me, Sarah, do you remember what I told you about choice? About how some things are just destiny?" Sarah did remember. The night before he'd rejected her, Victor had whispered those words against her skin, making her believe she was finally safe, finally home. "I remember you rejecting me in front of the entire pack," Sarah said, finding her voice. "I remember you calling me cursed." "I was protecting you," Victor said, and Sarah could hear the lie in his voice. "I had to make it look real so the others wouldn't suspect. But I've been watching you, sweetheart. Waiting for the right moment to come back for you." "Watching her?" Phoenix's voice was dangerously quiet. "Oh yes. I've been keeping tabs on my mate. Imagine my surprise when I discovered she'd shacked up with not one but 3 other men." "That's not very faithful, is it, Sarah?" "She's not your mate," Damon snarled. "You rejected her. A temporary necessity. But blood calls to blood, doesn't it, Sarah? You can play house with these rich boys all you want, but we both know where you really belong." Sarah felt sick. The possessiveness in Victor's voice, the casual way he dismissed her choices, the implication that he'd been watching her all this time, it was her worst nightmare come to life. "I don't belong to you," she said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "I never did. We'll see about that. I'm coming for you, sweetheart. And I'm bringing friends. Lots of friends." The line went dead. For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of Sarah's ragged breathing. Then Damon was moving, pulling out his own phone and barking orders in a voice that brooked no argument. "Security alert level red. Lock down the building. I want every entrance monitored, every exit secured. And get me a location trace on that call." Atlas was already at his laptop, fingers flying over the keys. "I'm coordinating with our allies. If Victor is bringing rogues onto our territory, we need to be ready." Phoenix hadn't moved from Sarah's side, his presence steady and reassuring even as she could feel the predatory energy radiating from him. "How many rogues could he have?" Sarah asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Doesn't matter," Phoenix said grimly. "Could be 5, could be 50. We'll handle it." "You don't understand," Sarah said, panic rising in her chest. "Victor is smart. Vicious. He won't come at you directly, he'll look for weaknesses, ways to hurt you where you're vulnerable." "Then it's a good thing we don't have any weaknesses," Damon said, ending his call. Sarah stared at him. "I'm your weakness. All of you. He knows that if he threatens me, you'll do anything to protect me." "Yes," Atlas said without looking up from his computer. "We will." The simple certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it made Sarah feel like she was drowning. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she said, standing abruptly and immediately regretting it as her shoulder protested. "This is why I should have left after the first attack. I'm putting you all in danger." "Sarah." Damon's voice cut through her panic like a blade. "Stop." "No, you stop," Sarah said, rounding on him with surprising fury. "All of you, just stop. Stop making decisions for me. Stop treating me like I'm some fragile thing that needs to be protected. Stop acting like I don't get a say in my own life." The three brothers stared at her in surprise. Sarah realized this was the first time she'd raised her voice to any of them, the first time she'd pushed back against their protective instincts. "I'm tired," she continued, her voice rising with each word. "I'm tired of being treated like a victim, tired of having my choices made for me, tired of being told what I can and can't handle. Victor treated me like property he could discard and reclaim at will. My father treated me like an embarrassment to be managed. And now you three are treating me like a prize to be fought over. That's not," Phoenix started. "Isn't it?" Sarah challenged. "You stand there making war plans and security arrangements without even asking what I want. You declare that you'll protect me without considering that maybe I don't want to be the reason you get hurt. You tell me about falling in love with me like it's something that's happening to you rather than something we're choosing together." Damon looked like she'd slapped him. "We're trying to keep you safe." "By taking away my agency," Sarah shot back. "By making me a passenger in my own life. Do you want to know what I want? I want to fight. I want to stand beside you instead of hiding behind you. I want to face Victor and tell him exactly what I think of him. And I want to choose you, all of you, not because you're protecting me or because of some ancient bond, but because I love you." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just gone off. Sarah realized what she'd said, realized she'd just declared her love for three men in the middle of a shouting match, and felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Sarah," Atlas said softly. "I love you," she repeated, quieter now but no less fierce. "I love Damon's intensity and his unwavering loyalty. I love Atlas's steadiness and his quiet strength. I love Phoenix's joy and his ability to find light in the darkness. And I love how you fit together, how you balance each other, how you've made room for me in something that was already perfect." She took a shaky breath. "But I won't be protected to death. I won't be the weak link that breaks you apart. If Victor wants a fight, then we fight. Together. As equals. Or I walk away right now and face him alone." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could see the three brothers processing what she'd said, could practically see them recalibrating their approach. Then Phoenix started to laugh. "What's funny?" Sarah demanded. "You," Phoenix said, his grin spreading across his face like sunrise. Standing there all fierce and beautiful, basically telling three alpha wolves that they're being overprotective idiots. "Do you have any idea how magnificent you are right now?" Despite everything, Sarah felt her lips twitch with the beginning of a smile. "He's right," Atlas said, closing his laptop and giving her his full attention. "You're right. We were so focused on protecting you that we forgot to include you in the decisions that affect your life." Damon moved closer, his dark eyes serious but no longer cold. "You said you love us." Sarah lifted her chin. "I did. And you want to fight beside us." "I do. Even though it's dangerous. Even though you could get hurt." "Even though you could get hurt," Sarah corrected. "That's what partnerships are about, isn't it? Sharing the risks as well as the rewards." Damon studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. Partners." "Partners," Atlas agreed. "Partners who are about to kick some serious rogue ass," Phoenix added with relish. Before Sarah could respond, the building's alarm system activated, a low, pulsing tone that meant immediate danger. Through the window, Sarah could see dark shapes moving through the garden, too many to count. "He's here," she said unnecessarily. Damon moved to the window, his expression grim. At least 30 of them. All armed. All looking for blood. 30 against 4, Phoenix mused. I like those odds. You're insane, Sarah said. Probably. But we're insane together, which makes all the difference. Atlas joined Damon at the window, his tactical mind already working. They're trying to surround the building. Classic containment strategy. Then we don't let them contain us, Sarah said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her own voice. We go to them. Sarah, Damon started. Partners, she reminded him. You said partners. Damon looked at her for a long moment, then smiled, the first genuine smile she'd ever seen from him. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and somehow more dangerous at the same time. Partners, he agreed. Let's go show Victor what happens when he threatens our family. As they prepared to face the threat outside, Sarah realized something had fundamentally shifted. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't running from a fight. She was running toward one, with 3 men she loved at her side. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. Outside, Victor's voice echoed through the night, calling her name with possessive fury. But Sarah no longer felt like prey being hunted. She felt like a predator who'd finally found her pack. And God help anyone who tried to tear them apart. Chapter 8. The battle cry that split the night air wasn't human, it was something primal, ancient, and utterly terrifying. Sarah felt it resonate in her bones as Victor's voice rose above the chaos outside, commanding his rogues with the authority of someone who'd spent months planning this moment. Sarah. His voice carried through the reinforced glass like a lover's whisper turned nightmare. Come out, beautiful. Let's finish what we started. Damon's hand found her shoulder, steady and warm despite the violence brewing just beyond their walls. Last chance to stay here where it's safe. Sarah turned to face him, seeing her own determination reflected in his dark eyes. I told you, we're partners now. Partners don't abandon each other when things get difficult. Even when those things include 30 armed rogues who want to tear you apart? Phoenix asked, though his tone suggested he already knew her answer. Especially then. Sarah moved toward the window, her injured shoulder protesting but her resolve unwavering. Below, she could see Victor at the center of his small army, and even from this distance, she could feel his fury like heat radiating off asphalt in summer. He looked different than she remembered. Leaner, harder, with scars across his face that spoke of violence and survival. His dark hair had grown longer, and there was something in his posture that suggested barely controlled rage. This wasn't the man who'd courted her with poetry and promises. This was something else entirely. He's changed, she said quietly. Atlas joined her at the window, his tactical mind already cataloging threats and advantages. 6 months alone with rogues will do that to a man. The question is whether he's still thinking clearly or if he's let obsession cloud his judgment. Does it matter? Damon asked, checking the action on a pistol that had appeared from somewhere Sarah hadn't seen. Either way, he ends tonight. Sarah watched Victor pace among his followers, saw the way they deferred to him, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October air. He's not the same person I knew. That Victor was arrogant and cruel, but he was also calculating. This one. She shook her head. This one looks like he has nothing left to lose. Then we'll have to make sure he loses everything, Phoenix said, and the cheerful mask he usually wore had been replaced by something far more dangerous. A new voice joined Victor's from below, female, sharp with authority. Sarah peered through the gathering darkness and felt her blood freeze. Elder Sterling, she breathed. Who? Atlas asked, but Sarah was already moving away from the window, her face pale. Lydia's grandmother. She's on the Supernatural Council, and she's never liked the Ravencrest family. If she's here. Sarah's voice trailed off as the implications hit her. If she's here, then this isn't just about Victor wanting his mate back, Damon finished grimly. This is about the Council using him as an excuse to challenge our authority. Before anyone could respond, Lydia burst through the door without knocking, her usually perfect composure completely shattered. "We have a problem. A big one." "Your grandmother?" Atlas guessed. Lydia nodded, her face grim. "She's convinced 3 other council members that your Protection Trinity bond is a violation of supernatural law. They're claiming that Sarah is being held against her will, that the bonds were coerced, and that you're using ancient magic to circumvent pack authority." "That's ridiculous," Phoenix said hotly. "Sarah chose this. All of it. Is it?" Lydia's voice was gentle but pointed. "Because from the outside, it does look convenient. A cursed woman with nowhere else to go, 3 powerful brothers who could gain significant political advantage from controlling her story." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "They think you're using me. And they think you're too damaged to make rational decisions," Lydia continued. "Elder Sterling has been building a case for weeks. Victor showing up alive just gave her the perfect excuse to act." Through the window, Sarah could see more figures moving in the darkness. Not rogues, these moved with the disciplined precision of official enforcers. "How many?" Damon asked, his voice deadly calm. 12 council enforcers, plus Victor's rogues. And they have writs of enforcement. Lydia's voice was tight with worry. Legal authority to take Sarah into custody pending a full council hearing. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her again, just like they had at Silver Creek. Just like they always did when she thought she'd found something good. "No." The word came out harder than she'd intended, but Sarah didn't care. She was done being a pawn in other people's games. "I won't go." "Sarah," Atlas started. "I said no." She turned to face all of them, her green eyes blazing with a fury that had been building for months. "I'm done. Done being pushed around, done being told what I can and can't choose, done having my life decided by people who think they know what's best for me." Damon moved closer, his expression unreadable. "What are you saying?" Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to say would change everything. "I'm saying I want to make the bonds real. Not contract marriages, not temporary arrangements, real bonds. Permanent ones. Soul-deep connections that no council, no pack, and no bitter ex-mate can break." The silence that followed was so complete Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. She watched the 3 brothers exchange one of their wordless communications, saw something shift in the air between them. "Sarah," Phoenix said carefully, "do you understand what you're asking? Real bonds, there's no going back from that. Ever." "I know. It would mean giving up any chance of a normal life," Atlas added. "Mate bonds with 3 alphas simultaneously, it's never been done. We'd be writing new rules as we go." "I know. And if you're wrong about us," Damon said quietly, "if we end up disappointing you or hurting you or..." "You won't." Sarah's voice was steady, certain. "I know you won't because I know you. All of you. I know Damon pretends to be cold because he's terrified of losing someone else he loves. I know Atlas thinks he has to carry the weight of the world because someone taught him that caring for others is his responsibility. I know Phoenix uses humor as armor because someone convinced him that his job is to keep everyone else happy." She moved closer to them, close enough to touch. "But I also know that Damon would burn down the world to keep his family safe. I know Atlas has the strongest heart of anyone I've ever met. I know Phoenix's joy isn't an act, it's a choice he makes every day to find light in the darkness. And I know that together, you 3 are the most incredible thing I've ever seen." Sarah reached for Damon's hand first, then Atlas's, then Phoenix's, linking them all together. Sarah reached for Damon's hand first, then Atlas's, then Phoenix's, linking them all together. "I love you," she said simply. "All of you. Not because you're protecting me, not because I'm grateful, not because I don't have anywhere else to go. I love you because you're brilliant and brave and beautiful, and because when I'm with you, I finally understand what home feels like." Damon's hand tightened on hers, and when she looked up at him, she saw tears he was trying not to shed. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough with emotion. I've been terrified of this moment since the day we met. terrified of admitting that I love you because loving someone means being vulnerable to losing them. And I can't. I can't survive losing someone else I love. You won't lose me, Sarah said firmly. Not to Victor, not to the council, not to anything. I'm choosing you, Damon. I'm choosing all of you. Atlas lifted their joined hands, pressing his lips to her knuckles. You're not my responsibility, he said quietly. You never were. You're my choice. The best choice I've ever made. Phoenix was grinning now, but there were tears on his cheeks. You know what the funny thing is? I've been joking around, being playful, because I was scared you'd see how serious I am about you and run. But the truth is, Sarah Nightfall, you're not just someone I'm attracted to. You're the other half of my soul. Before Sarah could respond, the building's lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red light that made the approaching army look like something out of a nightmare. Sarah could hear boots on the stairs, voices in the hallway, the sound of doors being forced open. Time's up, Lydia said grimly. They're in the building. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, not fear, but determination. These people wanted to tear apart what she'd found? Let them try. How do we make the bonds real? She asked. Right now. Tonight. Sarah, it's not that simple, Atlas started. It is that simple, Sarah interrupted. Blood and intent, right? Ancient magic doesn't care about paperwork or council approval. It cares about choice and commitment and love. Damon was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. You want to perform a true bonding ritual in the middle of a siege. I want to make sure that no matter what happens next, we're truly family. Legally, magically, completely. The sound of voices in the hallway was getting closer. Sarah could hear Victor's voice among them, issuing orders with the authority of someone who thought he'd already won. Do it, Phoenix said suddenly. She's right. Whatever happens next, we face it as a real family. Atlas was already moving, pulling a knife from somewhere Sarah hadn't seen. Ancient Pack Law, Section 15. Blood bonding between multiple mates. It requires physical contact, blood exchange, and verbal commitment. And it's completely irreversible, Damon added, but he was taking the knife from Atlas with steady hands. Sarah nodded. I know. That's the point. The first pounding on their door started just as Damon drew the blade across his palm. Blood welled, dark and red in the emergency lighting, and he offered his hand to Sarah. Sarah Nightfall, he said formally, I offer you my blood, my loyalty, and my heart. Will you bond with me as mate, partner, and equal? Sarah didn't hesitate. She pressed her palm to his, feeling his blood mix with hers as something electric shot through her entire body. I accept your offer, Damon Ravencrest. I offer you my blood, my loyalty, and my heart in return. The magic hit her like lightning, but instead of pain, it was pure connection, Damon's strength, his determination, his fierce protective love flowing into her and becoming part of who she was. Atlas was next, taking the knife and making the same cut, the same offer. When their blood mixed, Sarah felt his steadiness anchor her, his quiet strength becoming her foundation. Phoenix's bond was different, bright and warm and joyful, like sunshine after a storm. When their blood mingled, Sarah felt his unshakable optimism become part of her core. But it wasn't until all four of them joined hands, their blood creating a circuit of connection, that Sarah understood what they'd truly done. This wasn't just three separate bonds, this was something entirely new. A four-way connection that made them not just mates, but a true supernatural family unit. The door burst open just as the magic settled into place. Victor stood in the doorway, flanked by council enforcers and rogue wolves, his scarred face twisted with rage. Behind him, Sarah could see Elder Sterling, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the late hour and the violence of their arrival. Sarah, Victor said, his voice carrying the possessive fury of a man who'd lost something he considered his property. Step away from them. Now. No, Sarah said simply, and she felt the strength of her new bonds flowing through her like steel in her spine. Victor's eyes flicked to their joined hands, still bloody from the bonding ritual, and his face went white with understanding. You didn't. Tell me you didn't just. We did, Damon said calmly. Sarah is our mate now. Legally, magically, completely. Your claim on her is void. My claim, Victor started forward, but Elder Sterling's hand on his arm stopped him. Mr. Shadowmere, she said, her voice carrying the authority of centuries of pack politics, please allow me to handle this. She stepped into the room, her cold gaze moving from the blood on their hands to the obvious magical residue in the air. Sarah could feel the older woman's power, ancient, calculating, and utterly without warmth. Ms. Nightfall, Elder Sterling said formally. Or should I say, Mrs. Ravencrest? This is highly irregular. So is breaking into someone's home with an army, Sarah replied evenly. We have legal authority. You had legal authority, Atlas corrected. Past tense. The bonding ritual we just completed supersedes any council jurisdiction over Sarah's personal choices. Elder Sterling's eyes narrowed. Ancient bonding rituals require blood, intent, and mutual consent, Phoenix finished cheerfully. All of which we had. Care to challenge the validity of a ritual that predates the council by several thousand years? Sarah watched the political calculation happen in real time on Elder Sterling's face. Challenging an ancient bonding ritual would require the full council to convene, would involve months of legal proceedings, and would ultimately be unwinnable. The magic was already done, already settled into place. This is not over, Victor snarled, and Sarah could see madness flickering in his eyes. You think some blood ritual changes what we had? What we were meant to be? What we had, Sarah said clearly, was you rejecting me in front of an entire pack and calling me cursed. What we were meant to be was nothing, because you were never strong enough to handle what I am. I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself, Sarah cut him off. And when that stopped being convenient, you came here to reclaim what you thought was yours. But I was never yours, Victor. I was just too broken to realize it. Something dangerous flickered across Victor's face, and Sarah felt her new mates tense beside her. You want to know about broken? Victor asked, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. Let me tell you what 6 months with rogues teaches a man. Let me show you what real strength looks like. He moved faster than Sarah had ever seen him move, crossing the room in a blur of motion that spoke of supernatural enhancement. But he wasn't fast enough. Damon met him halfway, and the collision sent both men crashing into the wall with enough force to crack the expensive wallpaper. They rolled apart, circling each other like the predators they were, and Sarah could see that this was about far more than just her. You want her? Damon asked, his voice deadly calm despite the blood trickling from a cut on his cheek. Then you go through me first. Gladly, Victor snarled, and launched himself forward again. What followed was less a fight than a systematic dismantling. Sarah had never seen Damon truly cut loose, had never witnessed the lethal efficiency that made him one of the most feared alphas in the supernatural community. Victor was fast, enhanced by whatever the rogues had done to him, but Damon was faster. Victor was strong, but Damon was stronger. Most importantly, Victor was fighting for possession. Damon was fighting for love. The fight ended with Victor on his knees, Damon's hand around his throat, and the very real possibility of death hanging in the air like smoke. Enough, Elder Sterling said sharply. This solves nothing. It solves everything, Phoenix said, and Sarah was surprised by the steel in his voice. It proves that Victor isn't strong enough to protect Sarah, which means his claim was invalid from the beginning. The council will never accept, Elder Sterling started. The council will accept what they have to accept, a new voice interrupted, and Sarah turned to see 3 more figures in the doorway. Council elders she recognized from portraits and political briefings, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Elder Morrison, Atlas said formally. Elder Winters. Elder Du Bois. How unexpected. Elder Morrison, a tall man with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed, stepped forward. We came as soon as we heard about the irregularities in tonight's proceedings. His gaze moved to Elder Sterling with obvious disapproval. Council enforcement actions require unanimous approval, Cordelia. You seem to have forgotten that. The situation was urgent. The situation was political, Elder Winters corrected, her voice crisp with authority. And you overstepped your bounds. Sarah watched the power dynamics shift in real time. Elder Sterling had acted without full council approval, had brought personal bias into what should have been an objective proceeding. She was suddenly the one on the defensive. As for the bonding ritual, Elder Dubois added, his French accent making the words sound almost musical, it appears to have been conducted properly and with full consent from all parties. The council has no grounds to challenge it. But the unusual nature, Elder Sterling tried. Makes it interesting, not illegal, Elder Morrison said firmly. Four-way bonds are rare, but they're not forbidden. And given the strength I can sense from this particular connection. He looked at Sarah and her mates with something that might have been approval. Perhaps the supernatural community could benefit from more such innovations. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Not just acceptance, but validation. These powerful, ancient beings were looking at what she and the brothers had created and seeing strength instead of abnormality. This is ridiculous, Victor said from where he was still kneeling, Damon's hands still around his throat. She's mine. She's always been mine. No, Sarah said quietly, and every eye in the room turned to her. I was never yours, Victor. I thought I was, because I was so desperate to belong somewhere that I convinced myself gratitude was love. But real love, real love doesn't try to possess. It doesn't demand ownership. It doesn't reject someone and then expect them to be waiting when you change your mind. She moved closer, her new mates flanking her like the family they'd become. Real love, she continued, sees your darkness and chooses to stay anyway. It fights for you, not against you. It makes you stronger, not smaller. And these three men have shown me what real love looks like every single day since they found me bleeding and broken on their doorstep. Victor's face cycled through rage, disbelief, and something that might have been grief. You don't understand what you're giving up. What we could have been. I understand perfectly, Sarah said. I'm giving up fear for love. I'm giving up settling for scraps when I could have a feast. I'm giving up the woman who was so afraid of being alone that she'd accept any treatment, and I'm choosing to be the woman who knows she deserves better. The silence that followed was broken by slow, deliberate applause. Elder Morrison was actually clapping, his weathered face creased in what might have been the first genuine smile Sarah had seen from any council member. Beautifully said, my dear, he said. And if I may say so, this is exactly the kind of progressive thinking the supernatural community needs more of. Progressive thinking? Elder Sterling's voice was sharp with disbelief. For individuals choosing to build something new rather than accepting the limitations of tradition, Elder Winters explained. A bond structure that creates exponential strength rather than linear addition. A family unit that could serve as a model for other supernatural communities struggling with modern realities. Sarah felt her eyes widen. They weren't just accepting her choice, they were celebrating it. You're suggesting, Phoenix started. I'm suggesting, Elder Morrison said with a smile, that the council would be very interested in observing how this new type of bond develops. Perhaps even offering official recognition and support. Which would make it much easier for other supernatural communities to accept, Elder Dubois added meaningfully. Sarah looked at her mates, seeing her own amazement reflected in their faces. What had started as a desperate solution to protect her had somehow become a blueprint for supernatural evolution. There is one small matter, Elder Winters said carefully. The question of Mr. Shadowmere's actions tonight. Breaking and entering, threatening council-recognized bonds, bringing rogues onto Ravencrest territory. Victor's face went pale. I was acting within my rights. You have no rights here, Damon said coldly, finally releasing his grip on Victor's throat. You gave those up when you rejected your mate in front of witnesses. The council will deal with Mr. Shadowmere, Elder Morrison said firmly. As for his rogue associates. His gaze moved to the enforcers still standing in the doorway. I believe they're currently being detained by Ravencrest security. What happens to him? Sarah asked, and she was surprised to find that she felt pity rather than anger when she looked at Victor. Exile, Elder Winters said simply. Far from any recognized pack territory. He'll have to make his own way in the world. Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think this is over? You think some magic ritual changes what you are, Sarah? You'll kill them. All of them. It's what you do. No, Sarah said firmly. It's what I was afraid I did. But I know the truth now. Which is? Sarah looked at each of her mates in turn, seeing love and acceptance and unshakable faith in their eyes. The truth is that my previous mates didn't die because I was cursed. They died because they weren't strong enough to protect both me and themselves. Because they saw me as something fragile that needed to be hidden away instead of a partner who could fight beside them. She turned back to Victor, her voice gaining strength with each word. But these 3 men? They're strong enough. Strong enough to love me completely, strong enough to let me be everything I am, strong enough to build something new instead of trying to fit me into something old. And that's why this time will be different. Victor stared at her for a long moment, and Sarah saw the exact instant when he finally understood that he'd truly lost her. Not to the bonds, not to the council's politics, but to her own choice to love and be loved properly. Guards, Elder Morrison said quietly, and 2 council enforcers stepped forward. Please escort Mr. Shadowmere from the premises. His exile begins immediately. As Victor was led away, he looked back one last time. You'll regret this, he said, but the words lacked conviction. He looked like a man who'd gambled everything and lost. No, Sarah said simply. I won't. After the council members and enforcers had left, taking their political drama and supernatural bureaucracy with them, Sarah found herself alone with her 3 mates in a room that looked like a hurricane had hit it. Well, Phoenix said cheerfully, that was exciting. Exciting, Atlas repeated dryly. Is that what we're calling almost getting arrested by the Supernatural Council? Hey, we didn't almost get arrested. We almost got political recognition for creating an entirely new form of supernatural family structure. Damon moved to the window, checking to make sure all the rogues had indeed been cleared from the property. It's over, he said, and Sarah could hear the disbelief in his voice. It's just beginning, Sarah corrected, moving to join him at the window. The garden below was empty now, peaceful in the moonlight. No armed figures, no political tensions, no threats to their newfound happiness. Just space for them to build whatever came next. Are you sure about this? Damon asked quietly. About making it real? About choosing us permanently? Sarah turned to face him, reaching up to touch the scar on his cheek left by Victor's attack. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Even though it means dealing with supernatural politics for the rest of our lives? Atlas asked, settling into one of the chairs that had somehow survived the chaos. Even though it means being part of a family that attracts this much drama? Phoenix added, flopping down on the couch with theatrical exhaustion. Sarah looked at the 3 of them, brilliant, brave, beautiful, and completely hers now, and felt her heart swell with a happiness so fierce it almost hurt. Especially because of all of that, she said. I'm done being afraid of living, done being afraid of loving, done being afraid of being fully myself. And I want to be fully myself with you 3 for the rest of my very long life. How long do you think that might be? Phoenix asked with interest. Well, Atlas said thoughtfully, mate bonds between multiple alphas are theoretically stronger than single bonds. Enhanced healing, extended lifespan, increased magical resistance. Are you saying we might be functionally immortal? Damon asked. I'm saying we might have a very long time to figure it out, Atlas replied with a small smile. Sarah felt something flutter in her chest, not fear, but excitement. A long life with these 3 incredible men? Time to explore their new bond, to build something unprecedented, to love and be loved without reservation? Good, she said firmly. Because I have plans. Plans? Phoenix's eyes lit up with interest. Lots of plans. Plans for this new type of family structure the council wants to observe. Plans for showing other supernatural communities that love doesn't have to fit traditional molds. Plans for making sure no one else has to go through what I went through, being told they're cursed when they're just different. Sarah moved to the center of the room, where she could see all three of them clearly. But first, she said, I have plans for us. Plans for learning how to be a family, for figuring out how this four-way bond actually works, for building a life together that's everything we want it to be. And if people don't accept it? Damon asked. Then they'll learn to, Sarah said with a confidence that surprised even her. Because we're not going anywhere, and we're not changing to make other people comfortable. We're going to be exactly who we are, love exactly how we love, and let the world adapt to us. Phoenix was grinning now, that infectious joy that made everything seem possible. I love it when you get all fierce and determined. It's incredibly attractive. Everything about her is incredibly attractive, Atlas said mildly. Agreed, Damon added, and Sarah felt her cheeks heat despite everything they'd been through. Speaking of attractive, Phoenix said, rising from the couch with fluid grace, we should probably discuss the more intimate aspects of our new arrangement. Sarah's blush deepened. That is, we haven't really. We have time, Atlas said gently. All the time in the world to figure out what works for us. And what we want, Damon added, moving closer. What you want. What makes you happy? Sarah looked at the three of them, seeing love and patience and desire in their eyes, and felt the last of her fears melt away. This was her family now. These were her partners, her mates, her chosen ones. And they were right, they had time to figure everything out together. What I want, she said quietly, is to go to bed. All of us. Together. Not for intimate things, she added quickly, seeing their expressions. Just to sleep. To know that when I wake up tomorrow, you'll all still be here. That this is real and permanent and mine. Ours, Phoenix corrected softly. Ours, Sarah agreed, and the word felt like coming home. As they settled into Damon's enormous bed, because of course the eldest brother had the largest room, Sarah found herself surrounded by warmth and protection and love. Damon's arm around her waist, Atlas's hand in her hair, Phoenix's leg tangled with hers. Sarah? Damon's voice was soft in the darkness. Thank you. For what? For choosing us. For being brave enough to fight for this. For showing us what it means to be a real family. Sarah smiled against his chest. Thank you for being worth fighting for. As sleep claimed her, Sarah's last coherent thought was that for the first time in her adult life, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As partners. As equals. As family. And somewhere in the depths of her dreams, she could swear she heard her grandmother's voice, warm with approval. Well done, little wolf. Well done. Epilogue, 6 months later. Sarah stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at the little plastic stick in her hands with a mixture of wonder and terror. 3 pink lines. Unmistakably, undeniably positive. She was pregnant. The laugh that bubbled up from her chest was part hysteria, part pure joy. After everything she'd been through, all the fears about being cursed and bringing death to those she loved, she was carrying new life. Sarah? Phoenix's voice came from the bedroom, warm with concern. Everything all right in there? She opened the bathroom door to find all 3 of her mates waiting anxiously. They'd become incredibly attuned to her moods over the past months, able to sense her emotional state through their bond even when she tried to hide it. I have news, she said, holding up the test with a trembling hand. The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah watched 3 of the most powerful men in the supernatural world stare at a piece of plastic like it held the secrets of the universe. Is that? Atlas started. 3 lines, Phoenix breathed. Which means? Damon's voice trailed off. We're having a baby, Sarah finished, and then she was crying and laughing at the same time as 3 pairs of arms enveloped her. A baby, Phoenix repeated, spinning her around carefully. "We're having a baby. How is this possible?" Atlas asked, his scientific mind already working. Multiple alpha bonds, supernatural genetics, the magical interference from the ancient ritual. "Does it matter how?" Damon asked, and Sarah was surprised to see tears in his dark eyes. "It's happening. We're going to be parents. All of us," Sarah said firmly. "I don't care about biology or genetics or who contributed what. This baby will have 3 fathers and 1 very grateful mother." Over the following weeks, Sarah discovered that being pregnant while bonded to 3 protective alphas was an experience unlike anything she could have imagined. Damon immediately doubled her security detail, installed panic rooms in every Ravencrest property, and began researching supernatural pregnancy complications with the intensity of a man preparing for war. Atlas started monitoring her vital signs through their bond, adjusting their shared living spaces to optimize her comfort, and consulting with every supernatural physician in North America. Phoenix began a campaign to keep her laughing and relaxed, reading pregnancy books with theatrical dramatic flair and practicing lullabies that made her cry happy tears. "You're all completely insane," Sarah told them one evening as she watched Damon install yet another security camera while Atlas researched pregnancy nutrition and Phoenix practiced swaddling techniques on a stuffed wolf. "Insanely devoted to you and our child," Phoenix corrected, successfully wrapping the stuffed animal without dropping it. "There's a difference." "A subtle one," Sarah said dryly, but she was smiling. The Supernatural Council had indeed begun studying their bond structure, and other communities were starting to experiment with similar arrangements. Sarah found herself giving lectures to groups of supernatural leaders, sharing their experiences and helping others navigate the complexities of non-traditional family structures. It was during one of these lectures that Elder Morrison approached her afterward, his expression thoughtful. "My dear," he said, "there's something you should know. About your previous mates." Sarah felt her blood chill. "What about them?" "We've been conducting our own investigation into their deaths. The patterns, the timing, the circumstances." Elder Morrison paused. "You were right. They weren't killed by a curse. They were murdered." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Murdered? By who?" "Someone who wanted you isolated, vulnerable, convinced that you were dangerous." Elder Morrison's expression was grim. "Someone who's been planning this for a very long time." Sarah felt her mate's protective instincts flare through the bond, their alarm and fury washing over her in waves. "Who?" Damon's voice was deadly quiet. Elder Morrison met his gaze steadily. "We're still investigating. But whoever it is, they made one crucial mistake." "Which was?" "They underestimated what you 4 would become together." Elder Morrison smiled. "They thought they could break you by making you afraid to love. Instead, they drove you to create something stronger than anything the supernatural world has seen in centuries." As Sarah processed this revelation, that her fears had been deliberately manufactured, that someone had orchestrated years of grief and guilt to manipulate her, she felt something settle in her chest. Not anger, but resolve. "Let them come," she said quietly. "Whoever's behind this, whatever they're planning, let them come. They wanted to see what happens when you mess with my family." She looked at her 3 mates, seeing her own determination reflected in their eyes. They're about to find out. But for now, surrounded by love and protection and the promise of new life growing inside her, Sarah Ravencrest was exactly where she belonged. Home. Safe. Chosen. Cherished. And ready for whatever came next. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share and subscribe for more. Like we always do, do not forget to drop your opinion about the story. Bye for now.